Bill, you're welcome to join us. Everybody here? Yep. Got everybody. All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the meeting, the May meeting of the Tennessee Fish and Wildlife Commission. My name is Jim Ripley. I'm the chair of the commission, and today we meet in our committees. There may be members of the public that would have comment today, and we welcome your comments. We would ask that you come to the front, speak into the microphone so that everybody can hear you, and that you give us your name and where you're from. And we limit discussion to 3 minutes. Danette, if you'll help me to keep up with that. I'd ask you to silence your cell phones at this point. All right. Danette, please call the roll.
Tommy Woods.
Here.
Angie Box.
Here.
Monte Belew.
Here.
Stan Butt.
Here.
Wally Childress.
Here.
Bill Cox.
Here.
Chris Devaney. Jimmy Granbery.
Here.
Steve Jones.
Here.
Brian McLerran.
Here.
Kent Woods. Hank Wright.
Here.
Jim Ripley.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Danette. At this time, I'll call on Bobby Wilson, our director, for the director's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The big news is for our agency, as far as our central offices, we opened it back up to the public on Monday. We also, our employees as well, we're not sure if it's at least 50% of them will come back, maybe more, but we're going to ease back into it, maybe some kind of hybrid system, but it's good to have everybody back. Good to be back in the office and seeing folks, seeing their faces again. Just to let you know, I've been busy since the last commission meeting, involved with the UT Agricultural Advisory Board. Went to a meeting with them. Actually, it was a Zoom meeting. The Lone Oaks Advisory Council meeting was this last week. It was I got to go to the Bassmaster Open on Pickwick at State Park. We've done some improvements there with the State Park. We've given them some money to do some things, and that was pretty cool to see all that, and to also see the fishermen there as well. Got to catch up with some folks that I knew, hadn't seen in a while. We also had our monthly meeting with the commissioners, Charles Hatcher with Agriculture and David Salyers with TDEC, and it's always a real productive meeting, and at that one we also included some of our staff, and they had some of their staff too. So the Recovering America's Wildlife Act, we've mentioned that a couple times. I don't have anything to report as far as progress. I know that it was introduced into the House, and the next would be the Senate. They're still looking for a Senate sponsor in D.C., and I think they've got one, but they haven't identified them yet. So that'll be, hopefully we'll get some good news on that pretty soon as well. Wildlife officer folks and the law enforcement folks have been busy week before last and this week interviewing for our new wildlife officers. And I think Colonel Ryder told me there was about 116 or so applications. People had actually applied for 9 positions, and they interviewed a first round like they always do. It's a shorter interview, and they had about, tell me, Colonel Ryder's 45 folks, all well qualified, and they had to cut that down to about 20. Thank you. And thank goodness he's right in front of me. And anyway, so they conducted those interviews a little more intense, a little more digging into the officers more, and the cadets, I guess, for Monday and Tuesday, and they selected 9 of them. So they'll be announcing those, I guess, real soon. But the thing is, there's other 20, all 20 were probably qualified. It's hard to make that choice, hard to make that decision. So it was a tough thing for them to go through, but congratulations to them for doing that. And of course, they will be going to the law enforcement academy, the Tennessee Wildlife Resources Law Enforcement Academy at Buffalo Ridge, beginning last June 20? Mid-June, okay, thank you. Should I just give the microphone to Darren and let him do this? And anyway, and that's about it. There's one other thing I want to mention that you're all aware of, but this, Michael May, the Deputy Director of our business operations, announced that he would be leaving the agency and going to work for Brant And we thought he was going to be leaving around the 2nd of July, but due to some circumstances he's going to start work early down there, and he's going to leave us on the 11th of June. So this will be his last commission meeting as an agency employee. So I just want to recognize Michael for that, and we all are going to miss him dearly. He's been a valuable employee. He's been a valuable help to me in my job, and he's been a good friend. So we're going to miss him. Give everybody a chance to talk to him over the next day and a half. So just want to let you know that. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Thank you, Director. And Michael, we're going to miss you. Sorry you're going sooner than we thought, but you have been a tremendous asset, and we appreciate everything you've done. I want to recognize a couple of guests that we have here today. Clarence and Laura Dyes always join us, and we're glad to see you again. And Bub Edwards. Bub is over here. Bub is a former commissioner, has been commissioner, we call him sometimes. He served for 6 years, and you live in Henry County, don't you, Bub? So welcome. We're glad to have you back with us. All right. At this time, I'm going to recognize Tommy Woods, who is the chairman of the Boating and Law Enforcement Committee. Tommy?
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to call Colonel Darren Ryder to the podium for some well-deserved awards.
Thank you, Chairman. Just as a note on the hires, that Miss Randy sent out an email yesterday that all 9 that we offered a job to have accepted. And what's unique about those 9, one of them is a part-time boating officer for us, and then one of them is a full-time dispatcher. So congratulations to all of them. So I want to thank the agency and the commission for this opportunity to present recognitions for these officers who have displayed what the true meaning of going above and beyond the call of duty. This is the inaugural presentation of such recognition. In actuality, this concept has been discussed for several years, and today it will finally come to fruition. There have been many officers prior to today that certainly deserve recognition. So hopefully, this day forward, we will be able to continue presenting these in front of the commission. Valor, a definition, is great courage in the face of danger. So what these recipients will receive, they'll receive a plaque in addition to a pin that's orange and green, and it says Valor on it, and which will be approved to wear with this Class A uniform. And trust me, it's very limited on what you can put on this shirt, so it's going to be worn with pride. So we welcome that opportunity. First, a recognition is while on patrol at Pickwick Lake on Saturday, August 15, 2020, boating officer Seth Snow and part-time boating officer Jonathan Farrell, who was not able to attend today, they received a call about a boating incident in Dry Creek. At the time, the seriousness of the incident was unknown. As Officer Snow and Farrell were responded to the call, the urgency of the boating incident was unfolding with numerous calls to the local EMS. As the officers entered Dry Creek, bystanders began waving flags, blowing horns, screaming, and directing the officers to the incident. Upon arrival at the scene, the severity was immediately apparent. 2 personal watercrafts had collided in the back of Dry Creek Cove. A 6-year-old child and her father were seriously injured. Officer Snow radioed and advised TWRA dispatch to send more units. The 6-year-old child was receiving CPR by Good Samaritans in Dry Creek. The child did not have a pulse, along with turning blue in the face. The child's father was also receiving CPR, along with leg amputation, resulting in massive blood loss. Officer Snow removed his gun belt and used his underbelt as a makeshift tourniquet on the father's amputated leg. Numerous doctors and nurses were beginning to come to render aid to the victims. Due to the lack of cell service at the remote location, Officer Snow set up a small command post using his patrol boat to control the scene and communicate with various agencies by radio. Officer Snow guided the Hardin County Fire and Rescue to the location by his mobile command. As Officer Snow conducted the command center, the doctors and nurses performed CPR on both victims for approximately 1 hour. Hardin County Fire and Rescue transported both victims to an ambulance for further aid. The father was pronounced deceased on the scene, but a pulse was detected on the daughter at the ambulance. She was life-flighted to Le Bonheur Children's Hospital in Memphis, where she later died. Despite all good Samaritans, doctors, nurses, and TWRA officers, both victims died due to blunt force trauma. So, Seth, if you'll come forward and be recognized for those efforts. The next recipient for a life-saving award, Officer Scott Bauer, had finished conducting a joint search warrant in Stewart County, Tennessee, with District 12 and District 21 officers in the Bumpus Mills area of Stewart County. At approximately 11:45 p.m., Officer Bauer was driving back home to Montgomery County when he noticed flames in the distance at a house off of Highway 120. He drove to the house to investigate and noticed the left side of the house and the shed was on fire. He then banged on the front door and yelled, "Fire, fire, everyone get out." Eventually a woman, a man, and 3 children woke up and got out of the house. Officer Bauer placed the 3 children in his patrol truck along with the family dog to keep them safe and warm. He, along with other TWRA officers, assisted the local fire department and tried to extinguish the flames. The flames were extinguished and the house was not a total loss. The children, all under the age of 10, and Officer Bauer's truck told him their room was at the left side of the house where the fire started, and they were asleep when he knocked on the door to wake them up. Officer Bauer. I'm up here sweating. I ain't even done nothing. This next is a Distinguished Service Award that will go to Officer Chase Rich. While responding to a call about an injured raccoon in Dandridge on Sunday afternoon, District 42 Wildlife Officer Chase Rich heard cries for help coming from the nearby Ray Holler Road. He drove to the location and located a woman trying to crawl back to her house with a dog on a leash. The woman had slipped on a wet embankment near her home and had injured her ankle. No one inside could hear her calling for help, so Officer Rich took the dog to the house and notified the woman's daughter, who called her father for help. Officer Rich used a splint to stabilize her ankle and helped the injured woman's father load her into a vehicle for a trip to the emergency room. Officer Chase. This would be the last one, and it's a life-saving award, but it's a recognition to a group of officers. Bear with me, because this is a pretty good one, and it's a couple pages. So on June 28, 2020, 8 wildlife officers from District 21 and Region 2 were assigned to patrol Percy Priest Reservoir. Those officers were Dixon County Officer Ricky Lyle, Rutherford County Officer Ethan Davis. I'm just trying to let that video play. Rutherford County Sergeant Matt Bryan, Cheatham County Sergeant Brad Bagwell, Boating Officer Jeff Servin, Davis County Officer Clay Hetland, who is not present today, Davis County Officer Matt Norman, and Robertson County Officer Caleb Stratton. All of those officers reported to their assigned area of the reservoir at 1 p.m. that day to primarily work boating enforcement. At approximately 4:30 p.m., these officers were taking their late lunch break at the Corps Engineers compound off Bell Road near Percy Priest Dam. A storm system was approaching from the northwest with heavy wind gusts ahead of it and creating very rough water conditions across the reservoir. The wildlife officers were finishing lunch. They weren't fishing. They were finishing lunch and noticed several paddlecraft being blown across the lake, and operators had little control over the wind and waves. One paddleboard caught their eye with a young teenage male and female on it, and it was obvious they were struggling to get off the water. Seconds later, the paddleboard overturned, and the 2 occupants that were not wearing a life vest were thrown into 80-foot deep water. The female occupant could not get back up to the paddleboard and was struggling to stay above water. 7 of the officers ran towards the patrol boats in order to save her, while Officer Caleb Stratton had his binoculars out and kept eyes on her. He was yelling, "She's under, she's back up," she's yelling for help. This was very important because the officers knew where she was and knew she was definitely struggling to stay up and needed immediate help. The first boat out of the compound was driven by Sergeant Matt Bryan and had officers Ricky Lyle and Ethan Davis on it. Right behind that boat was Officer Clay Hetton, Sergeant Bagwell, and Officer Jeff Servin, followed by Officer Matt Norman's boat. The female was struggling to stay up as Sergeant Matt Bryan carefully maneuvered his boat up to her so that Officer Lyle and Davis could grab her. Officer Lyle stated she was sinking as we grabbed her arms. Officer Servin, Hetland, and Bagwell assisted in getting the teenage girl and boy into a boat and transported back to the Corps compound. They then fanned out on the lake and found other paddleboarders struggling after being overturned. Officer Norman headed towards Hamilton Creek, where most of the paddlecraft were congregated on Percy Priest. He assumed there would be others struggling there as well. He found another man that had fallen out of his kayak, and his life jacket had been blown away from him. Officer Norman threw him a life jacket, and he used it to swim to shallow water as Officer Norman gathered his kayak and the items that he had lost. These officers' quick actions no doubt prevented drownings and or injuries on Percy Priest Reservoir that evening. So I'll call y'all up here at once, and we'll do a group shot if you don't mind. So Sergeant Matt Bryan. Sergeant Bragg Bagwell, just hang out here. Congratulations. Officer Ricky Lyle. You go, Chairman. Hey, no, y'all stay. Yeah, they're going to spread out. Yes, sir. Officer Jeff Servin. Officer Caleb Stratton. Officer Ethan Davis. Officer Matt Norman. want to do a couple lines? Yeah, let's do a couple lines. Brad in the back. Scott in the back. Everybody's on.
These are big boys.
Yeah, come on, Rick, you get right here. Ma'am, I'm good. Quick, get out of the way.
I feel like a groundhog sort of peeking out. Don't say I look like a groundhog, Richard.
So for the group, if y'all will go outside in the lobby, we can get pictures with family and supervisors that are in attendance today. So Lee's going to set up the camera for the next presentation, but we'd like to get a group picture of everybody. Chairman Woods, thank you for the opportunity. That's all I have.
Thank you, Colonel Ryder. I'd like to call Colonel Ryder once more.
Yes, Lieutenant Colonel Moates will present the Boating Officer of the Year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Every year, the agency recognizes one outstanding wildlife officer for their work in boating safety. And for the calendar year 2020, we'll be recognizing Officer Josh Landrum. Josh is assigned to work Law Enforcement District 21 as a full-time boating officer. District 21 is in Region 2, contains Old Hickory Lake, Cumberland River, Percy Priest Lake, Caney Fork River, and the Red River. These bodies of water are popular tourist destinations for fishermen as well as recreational boaters. Officer Landrum excelled in the area of law enforcement. He inspected 404 recreational vessels for compliance, issued 85 citations and 34 warnings for law violations. He administered field sobriety tests to 45 boat operators, and which resulted in the removing of 24 impaired operators from public waters in 2020. He made 4 boating-related arrests for illegal drugs. Additionally, he removed 2 impaired vehicle operators from the roadway that he encountered on his way to and from the lake. He issued 2 citations for underage alcohol consumption and assisted 6 boaters on the water that required some type of assistance. He was also the lead investigator on 7 boating incidents that included 2 fatalities and assisted officers on numerous other incidents. In the area of education and outreach, Landrum taught 2 boating education classes, thereby certifying 15 students as safe boaters in Tennessee, and this was all done prior to our COVID restrictions of where we could not teach in-person classes anymore. Additionally, he provided 3 public programs, 2 television interviews, and assisted at a Mothers Against Drunk Driving event in Nashville that promotes sober operators. Officer Landrum was called out several times to assist with search and rescue on local waterways. He's worked with other officers to organize law enforcement details within the district and provides maintenance on the patrol boats as well. He has instructed new officers on boating under the influence detection and boating accident investigations. Officer Josh Landrum's dedication to law enforcement, the public, and his fellow officers has made him a valuable to District 21 and to the TWRA. Officer Landrum, if you'd come up, please.
that concludes the committee's report. And I'd just like to say, it's such an honor to look out and see all of our officers here today. It makes not only me, but the entire commission very proud. And I mean, guys, I get compliments on our officers occasionally. I got a text yesterday that a friend of mine had an encounter, and he was complimentary of the officer and how professional he was and how courteous he was. And that really means a lot to us, and we really appreciate you guys. Chairman Ripley.
Thank you. All right, at this time, I'll call on Jimmy Granbery, who's the chairman of the Wildlife Committee. Jimmy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll call on Joe Benedict. Joe, you're going to talk about Proclamation 2103 and 2104.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. It's great to be in this beautiful part of the state as we enter summer here with the heat. Not something I look forward to, but nonetheless. We're here today to receive, or request rather, final approval for two different proclamations. Just a reminder, this is an off year for season setting. We do migratory game birds proclamations every year, and then on these off years, we have some CWD related changes to share with you, as well as a few additional opportunities wanted to request the addition of for this year. So I'll start with just a reminder of what we shared in April. The presentation in April, the preview of these proclamations occurred right after Chuck Yost provided a CWD chronic wasting disease update, which kind of was the final summary of the hunting season from last year. The changes related to CWD, the footprint in Tennessee, we have one high-risk county, which is Henderson County, as we move forward. So it was great to have such a minor change in the footprint of CWD this year. So the changes that we're requesting are about the counties that are in Unit CWD, and then also some wildlife management areas that fall within those counties. There's some other additional opportunities that we shared for hunting seasons on WMAs, and then a couple little housekeeping pieces in these proclamations. Is my mic cutting in and out? Okay, it sounds like that to me, so my apologies. So the recommendation in the proclamation is to add Henderson County into the Unit CWD. This is in Proclamation 21-03, statewide big game seasons. The second piece would be to clarify the eligible test results that relate to the replacement buck program. So that's kind of a simplification of what those test results are that would allow for replacement bucks. The other piece is to add Beach River, WMA, and the Henderson County portion of Natchez Trace State Forest into the August deer hunt in Unit CWD. So there's a list of those in that proclamation. So we'd add those two areas.
Mr. Chairman, the Wildlife Committee reviewed this Proclamation 2103 and voted unanimously for approval, and I bring this to the full commission for a vote as a motion.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Granbery. Ladies and gentlemen, commissioners, do you have any questions or comments at this point? Yes, sir.
The replacement buck does not carry over from one year to the next. And with the delay in testing, and I admittedly wasn't here when this was discussed and passed, but why couldn't we, or was it discussed why we're not? Since the delay in testing results getting back has been a month or 6 weeks, why couldn't we carry it over to the next year? I mean, you kill a buck December the 1st and you're not gonna, and he's positive, you're not gonna get a replacement buck in that year.
I think that's a great question. Bill, before we go there, do I hear a second to the motion?
I'm sorry.
I'll second. All right, we have a second from Commissioner Jones. Okay, Bill, I'm sorry to interrupt.
That's
Go
okay.
ahead.
That's my question.
That's a great question, Commissioner, and I wish Chuck Yost was here. He would have a much more detailed, articulate response than I do. Jennifer Wisniewski is here also. I think one of the main reasons is just for confusion of, we don't have paper tags anymore. If we had paper tags and we could issue a tag, it'd be easy to carry it forward. But within our reel system, when our hunters check someone and they check the reel system, there's some complexity there that we just weren't sure that was the best recommendation to do. And I guess if Jennifer's in here, I'll ask her if the commission is okay, if there's anything I'm missing there. I know there's some pieces I'm probably forgetting.
Well, the area, the CWD area is down in my area of the state, but I've got a lot of complaints or a lot of questions last year about the replacement buck, and with the delayed testing, and the legitimate complaints about that.
So we can functionally do that, and I've had discussions with Chuck, and he is for doing that, and we would like to do that. I think it's just something that we have to outline and get you guys to approve.
Okay, thank you, Jennifer. That's news to me. And I believe, Commissioner Cox, that does not take commission action, correct? It's an internal.
Well, it's in the proclamation that it doesn't carry over.
Oh, is that correct?
So there's some change that we have to make, but yes, we would like to do that because we agree. I mean, you kill something or you harvest a deer mid-December, you're not going to get that back before the season's over. And so, I mean, that's a good chunk of time that, and that.
Mr. Chairman, I'd offer an amendment to the proclamation to allow replacement buck to carry over to the following year, following license year.
Okay, we have a motion to amend to allow replacement bucks to be carried over to the next year. Did I state that correctly, Commissioner Cox?
Yes, sir.
All right. Do I have a second with regard to the motion? I have a second from Commissioner Butt. Is there discussion? We're discussing now only the motion to amend. Yes, sir.
Is there a cutoff date, or is that all season? What if you harvest a buck November 15th? Does that carry over to the next season because you weren't successful with the second, getting your replacement buck, or?
This was part of the discussion, yes. And in my mind, yes, you would get to carry that over, but I don't have all of the minds that have been thinking about this in this room right here, right now. So I can't answer for them, but in my opinion, yes.
Okay.
All right, just for clarification, I didn't hear all the question from Commissioner Wright, but the question, is there a time limit for the next year or the year you kill the deer? Is that the question? I need to change my amendment, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the question is, if the purpose of allowing the replacement buck to carry over because you can't get testing in a timely manner, you can't get your results. So you harvest a deer December 15th, you don't get your results till January 3rd. Well, season's over, but you got a positive and you get a replacement buck. But is there a cutoff date? Are you saying that if you harvest a buck November 15th and it's positive and you aren't successful the rest of that season, does that carry over? Or are you saying, is there December 10th, or when's the cutoff, if there is one?
I'm saying that the intent of my amendment is to allow a hunter who kills a buck in the replacement buck program that normally would have been, if he got the results back, to harvest another buck, which would give him a limit of 3 that particular year. If he doesn't kill another buck that year, he gets another buck the next year. That he gets that replacement the next year. So his limit would go to 3 the next year.
Okay, excuse me one second. Commissioner Cox, are you attempting to amend your amendment now?
No, I'm just
Okay.
giving the intent of the amendment. If I need to restate it, I'll be glad to, but the intent was to just amend it and remove, I guess, where it says it doesn't carry over to the next license year, to allow it to carry over to the next license year. He gets a replacement buck.
Systematically, it would be easiest if that replacement buck was the next buck that person killed. So if that person harvested a deer in December, didn't get their testing results back, and then they went out for the velvet hunt and they harvested a buck, that's their replacement buck. Like that, in the system, that would be the easiest for
And I'll make
us.
that part of my amendment.
Okay, if you would restate.
My amendment is.
Restate your amendment,
My
please.
amendment is to allow a replacement buck to carry over to the following license year if you don't get your results until after the season and you don't have that opportunity, and that it is counted as the first buck you kill the following license year.
Okay, so Commissioner Cox essentially has withdrawn his original motion to amend. He's replaced that with an amendment allowing replacement buck to carry over to the following year if you don't get your results in the year of the harvest. Do I have a second to that amendment?
Second.
Okay, I couldn't hear who that was now.
Monty.
Okay. Commissioner Belew, thank you. So we've got a motion.
Chairman, can I ask one question?
Yes, sir.
My only question would be, as far as enforcement is concerned, and the real system is concerned, is there gonna be any confusion there? Can you all keep that straight, and will that be able to be, able
Yes.
to be understood by the officer and, okay,
Yes, sir.
all right. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Wright.
Sorry. Bill, let me apologize. I'm for what you're saying. I think it solves a big problem, but the way it's stated now is if you don't get your results before the end of the season. Well, what if you get them on the last day? So that means you lose that replacement buck unless you can run out that very last day and get him. Maybe it's just, if you shoot one, your very next deer is a replacement buck, period.
I'm not sure how you would,
So like if season's over January 3rd and you get your results January 2nd, the way the amendment stated now is if you don't get your results
I
before
get
end of
what you're
season.
saying. What do you think would be fair, a week?
Heck, we want bucks harvested from Unit CWD, maybe.
That's right.
Maybe it's just if you shoot a positive deer, period, your very next deer is a replacement buck, period. Even if you shot it in the velvet hunt and you don't get to hunt again until the next velvet hunt. I don't know if that's what we're trying to accomplish.
So if you want the replacement buck, you have the option of killing it in the current license year or the next year?
If that's what's easiest for them to keep up with logistically with our system.
Yes, yes. I mean, it would be whatever your next buck killed would count as your replacement buck, and it could carry through the next license year.
So it could be used in the
Current
current
season
year, or it could
the
be
next.
carried over?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
Do I hear Commissioner Cox withdrawing his motion to amend as it was previously stated?
All right, before I do that, Michael was raising his finger. Do you have a comment?
Yes, sir. I think what we need to make sure is we're allowing it for nothing past the next license year, because I think in the real system we would have an extreme difficulty tracking it past that next license year. Other than that, I think we're fine.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, we're meeting tomorrow, right?
We are?
And this will be final action on tomorrow, is that correct?
That's correct, and you could move to table it to tomorrow if you so wish.
So why don't I withdraw my amendment and ask the agency to draft language and give it to us for tomorrow that would be express what the intention is and what works best for them.
All right?
Is that all right?
I'm going to take that as a motion. Actually, there's been a motion to table. Is there a second?
Second.
Second from Commissioner Woods. Any discussion with regard to tabling this issue until tomorrow? Hearing none. All in favor of tabling it, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right, we'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you. Hey, Jimmy, we're really voting in committee today. Both of these are on for tomorrow. So just, at this next one, just do it in committee. And
my apologies to Commissioner Granbery for not bringing this up, but I forgot. Sorry.
Okay, we've tabled part of this, that's 2103. Tell you what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna amend the agenda at this point to put 2104 on tomorrow's agenda as well, so we can deal with both of these at the same time. All right? Okay, where are we now?
All right, so I'd like to call Roger Shields up to the podium to give us a update on the 2021 turkey season.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you again for having me. And I'm honored to be able to get to speak to you again and talk about, give you a little bit of a summary, a partial summary of the 2021 spring turkey season that turned out to be a pretty good year. I say a partial summary because really only have half the data in yet. As you know, we have a hunter harvest survey that we conduct now, and that information that we get from it helps us understand the participation rate, how many hunters were participating, and the effort that they put into the season. And those pieces of information are really important for us as we're trying to understand and interpret the harvest data that we get. That survey has just started now that we've come to the end of the season, so we're still gathering the data. We don't have it to report on yet. The other thing I just wanted to mention, and Chief Benedict already touched on it, but this is what we would consider an off year. With that, and because we didn't see anything or haven't seen anything in the preliminary results from the reported harvest that caused us great concern, the agency is not bringing forward any recommended changes to the turkey regulations at this time. And with that, I want to just jump into some of the results that we saw. And I want to actually begin with the areas where we had the 2-week delay in the season opener. So those areas, again, are the Mississippi Alluvial Valley Unit and the southern Middle Tennessee counties. The Mississippi Alluvial Valley Unit, or the MAV, in addition to having a delay of 2 weeks to the season, it also had a reduction to a unit-wide bag limit of 2, which was different than the statewide new bag limit of 3. And again, the reason for these changes was to address population declines in these areas and to afford the population, the birds, an opportunity to go through their breeding behavior before any removals from harvest occur and before any disruption to their breeding behavior would happen. And to reduce the harvest a little bit, particularly along the Mississippi Alluvial Valley Unit, just to allow time for that populations in those counties to rebuild a little bit. So looking at the numbers, and this is the numbers just for those 9 counties. And I should mention too, because of this delay, they still closed at the same time as the rest of the state. So as we look at these numbers, it's important to keep in mind that their season was in effect 14 days shorter than it has been in the past. So I'm comparing the harvest from this year that's highlighted in gold compared to last year, which if you remember, last year was a little bit of a unique year because of the impact that COVID-19 had on recreation and other, more so the other activities that a person could be involved with that led to what we think is a lot higher participation among hunters and led to a little bit higher harvest. And then I'm also comparing against the 5-year average. And you can see that for the most part, we were well below the harvest levels from last year and slightly below the level for the 5-year average. The MAV unit had about 15% reduction from the 5-year average, whereas southern Middle Tennessee counties only were about 5% below the 5-year average. So basically the same, except for the 15% reduction in the MAV unit. let's jump to the entire state. This is for all the counties for the entire season. The numbers that we saw from the spring season here. This is, again, self-reported harvest numbers. And again, what we see is the numbers this year being below what they were last year. And again, that's what we expected, considering what was going on last year. But the numbers as a whole across the state were actually slightly above the 5-year average. And so kind of on par with what we've been seeing for the past 5 years. When we look a longer time frame there for the past 15 years, and you plot the reported harvest, we really see a pretty stable trend over that 15-year period. And so, again, kind of right on par with where things have been. Breaking that long-term trend down by our administrative region, this is the reported harvest for the 15 years by our different regions. And when you look at this year, or when you add this year into things, what you see is Region 2 and Region 4 over here on the right, they basically have stable harvest trends. Region 3 in the lower left has a slight increasing trend, and then Region 1 in the upper right has still a little bit of a declining trend in harvest. I know there was some interest in how the breakdown of the harvest was, and so this is breaking down adults from the jakes or the juveniles. This is, again, the 15-year records based on reported harvest or self-reporting of the harvest. This year we saw about 10% of the gobbler harvest was comprised of juveniles or of jakes. Long term, that percentage, that proportion varies from year to year. Long term average is about 13% of those birds of the harvest of gobblers is jakes, and so this year was a little bit lower than the long term average. And Commissioner McLerran, last time I spoke, you were asking for a sheet that would help describe what a jake is versus an adult, and I don't know if that was for your benefit or somebody else on the commission here, but the jakes are the ones with the short little beards. So just so keep straight on that one.
Thank you for clarification.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner McLerran.
Also,
let's let him get through, and then we come back.
Also, to just to compare, given that we did have a reduction in the bag limit, I thought you might be interested in the report of how many, or the hunter success. So again, in gold here for 2021, 65% of the successful hunters harvested one bird, 24% of the successful hunters harvested 2, 11% harvested 3, and of course, with only a bag limit of 3, we didn't have any that harvested 4 or more. And then if you compare those numbers to the previous year and the previous 5-year average, they were very similar, really. Basically, by reducing the bag, we have shifted some of that harvest to some of the other successful hunters. And you can see also the total number of successful hunters, very reminiscent of the total harvest itself. This year was somewhere intermediate between last year and the 5-year average. So just kind of wrap up here and what we saw from this year. Again, preliminary, kind of somewhat preliminary numbers here, but based on what we're seeing from reported harvest, it was a good year. I guess I would say an average year, but that's good. And the other thing that I again want to stress is the 2-week delay appears to be accomplishing our aims, right? We wanted to give those populations a delay in harvest and let them do their breeding, and so that was accomplished. And particularly for the MAV unit, we wanted to see some reduction in harvest to allow those birds a little bit of time to rebuild. And again, we saw about a 15% reduction. So, looking at that, granted, this is just the first year that we're looking at from these changes. It's a good observation, but it doesn't tell us the whole. It's just 1 year of data since those changes took place. And so, at this point, again, the agency is not making any recommendation for changes. We have more information coming in. We'll get some more information from the Hunter Harvest Survey, particularly with effort. And when you look at harvest in relation to effort and participation, it helps you really understand what happened during the hunting season. So we've got that information still coming in. And then, as I was saying, we have the 1 year of results, if you will, based on those changes that took place last year. And, I think it's important to kind of let the dust settle a little bit to see what effect the changes we have made will have on populations. And then we also have other information that we're gathering too. We've got the harvest rate study, that gobbler banding project that's getting us information on the actual harvest rate. So for these and other reasons, we are not recommending any changes at this point in time. We'd like to make sure that we'd like to get some of this information in before we recommend anything different. And that's my presentation to you today.
Thank you very much, Roger. And on behalf of the Wildlife Committee and the full commission, we really appreciate your efforts to get us timely information as requested over the time. I'm sure there's going to be a fair amount of questions, so I think the best way to do it, because I can't see everybody, I'm going to start on my left with Mr. Cox, and we'll just go down the line. If anybody has any questions for Roger or Joe, and then we can proceed on from there. So, Mr. Cox, Commissioner Cox, if you'd start off the question.
Thank you, Chairman. Roger, please explain to me how you, since the 2-week delay is only had one season, how do you say that it's accomplishing the mission? What basis are you saying that it's accomplished the purpose when we've only had one season as a delay?
Well, you make a good point, but and as I said, this is based off of it's very preliminary. It's the initial results. We've got 1 year's worth of information, but that 1 year is reflecting what we were wanting to see. We wanted to see a delay in harvest, which was accomplished, and we wanted to see a reduction in harvest, and not a severe reduction, because we want hunters to be able to have some hunting opportunity. So we wanted it to be a reduction, but not a severe reduction. And 15% is a reasonable reduction. So we'll have to see what, we're talking a couple years to make sure that trend continues. But it was good first year, indication.
Okay. The indication of the harvest is the basis that you set limits and that you make adjustments. If the harvest continues to decline, then it gives you concern that the population might be in decline. So I guess I don't understand if you want to reduce the harvest and then you look back and say, well, the harvest is going down, we need to do something. So are you setting it up to drive it down and then you have an emergency?
No,
I mean, it seems to be opposite efforts.
Yeah, so the component that we're not able to look at right now is when you match the harvest with the effort. And if we start to see catch per unit effort decline, that would be extremely concerning, right? Because the same amount of effort is not accomplishing the same level of harvest. In this case, we're looking to reduce the harvest because we want to see more birds survive each year into the next year and the next year. So yeah, I can see where that's a little confusing, that on one hand we say it's a concern that harvest is dropping, and on the other hand that's what we want to see. But in this case, we're looking at really considering that effort component too is really the one we want to look at.
Commissioner Belew.
Hey, thank you very much, and appreciate all this information that you've gotten us. If I'm passionate about anything, it's turkey hunting. I would love to see some regulation changes made next year. I would love to see a shortening of the season, whether it's on the front end. According to you, and I know we're just on the front end of it, but this MAV unit, you say good things about. I've heard other studies on it from Missouri to different places, and I think it may be the right thing. I think our season in Tennessee is a little long. I know a lot of people in West Tennessee don't, at least the people that I've talked to between Shelby County and Henry County, don't hunt the last week and a half 2 weeks of the season. But Chairman Ripley says on the front end of the season in East Tennessee, it's a lot cooler weather. I don't hunt in Tennessee, and they hunt more in the end of the season. So I understand that. That's a really valid point. So that brings me to the question, could turkey hunting ever be not a one-size-fits-all, but a regional type deal? I think the birds in West Tennessee, and I've just now really studying the 5-year average and the harvest report and all this. But what would you need to see? Number one, what would you need to see to change the seasons up, or even the bag limits from what we've got at this point right now? What would you need to see? One, and two, could it be a regional issue? I think I hear some of my friends that hunt in Middle Tennessee and Dixon County, Maury County, for example. They've got more birds than they know what to do with. My son-in-law lives in Shelby County. I don't know if he heard but 1 or 2 birds gobble all year. I hunt in Henry County and everywhere in between in West Tennessee. And I, from a hunter standpoint, I understand. I say I've seen a decline. What I feel like it is a decline, but can I sit here and back it up with what information that you've given to me today? No, I cannot. But I know I hear it a lot.
Right.
And I think you'll probably hear it from these guys in uniform, the guys that are out there on the back roads and checking these hunters. At least I think. But what would we need to do to change it up? What do you need to see, and can it be a regional deal?
See if I can address both of those questions for you, Commissioner. I'll address the first one, kind of what are we looking to see in terms of season date structure. Recall that we have a University of Tennessee project ongoing right now, and this was going to be the last year of data collection, but we were able to extend it a year to get 2 years of data collection after this delay in the season. And the purpose of this delay is really to try and improve reproduction. So what I'm looking to see is, did it result in improved reproduction, nesting success, nesting rate, something that will improve productivity? If we see that, then I would be probably in favor of trying to do something like that, more broadly. But we didn't want to jump into that before we saw it on the ground. So that, I guess, would be my first thing. I'd like to see some results from that study in particular, but we may see it in the summer survey as well. The second question, is it possible to do, or is a one-size-fits-all management effective? And I would say, so you may not be aware, but we have a turkey team comprised of biologists from the agency, and we've been working on creating or delineating some turkey management units. And we're pretty early still. I don't know how many units that might look like, but with the intent that we could then start to manage at more of a regional level. Because you're right, it is hard to manage, especially as diverse as Tennessee is from west to east, with a one-size approach. And so we're working on that. It's probably going to take longer than you're wanting, but we're looking at about a 2-year process from start to finish in terms of delineating those units and then working with stakeholders in those units to observe, to learn what their objectives are, what their values are, what they want with turkeys, with the different regulations that we could set, and then bring those to you. So that's why it's a longer process than anyway. That's why.
Hey, one last thing. This UT study, now is this year one of it, of a 6-year deal or 2-year?
So the UT study was originally a 5-year project that started in 2018, 17, somewhere in there. Like I said, this was going to be the 5th year of data collection, and then they'd have a year to write up the results and do all the the analysis. But with the change in the regulations last year, we saw an opportunity to actually measure these ideas of a delayed season having a reproductive effect. And so we are extending the project 1 additional year. The original 5 years will still be analyzed as a 5-year project, and we should have results a year after today. So we'll have kind of 2 years or 2 results coming still.
Appreciate your dedication. Thank you to the turkeys.
Just so the public will know, once the commissioners have asked their questions, we will have public comments. So now I'll ask Commissioner Jones if he has any questions.
Thank you, Chairman Granbery. So just for informational purposes, if we were I know that, last year when we were talking about this, we talked about we could always come back and change some of the parameters of the season this year. What would that process look like just for informational purposes? I've heard discussion about an emergency meeting and that type of thing. What would that look like? If we were to have an emergency meeting and change any of the parameters?
If you're looking to me, I'm going to look to these guys.
This is a
how
process
emergencies
question.
would work.
Tracy, would you address that for us?
How do you have an emergency meeting if you wanted to change the parameters of a season, bag limits?
An emergency meeting can be proclaimed. We give notice. We've done this before. We did this with CWD.
Mm-hmm.
And but we have to articulate what that emergency is. Any proclamation that comes out of that, you have the authority under your statute to proclaim emergency proclamations. Anything that comes from that will be effective immediately.
But is there a process like a 14-day public notice or anything like that? It's just...
Not for an emergency, no.
Okay. All right, so I just wanted to, for my own purposes and anybody else that had that question, wanted to clear that up. So one of the questions that I would have is, you've provided a lot of good information to the committee. I'm very appreciative of all your hard work. But one of the things that would interest me is if we look back at that harvest graph and saw where we were starting to decline 2016, 2017, and then we had that jump up during last year, and then it's dropped back down. How would that coincide with, so we've talked about breeding and productive rates. How about poult survival?
In what regard?
Well, so, I know that I think the average that we shoot for is around two turkeys per nest survive, and I know that we've not had that some in years past. So how would that look on an annual basis, poult survival, compared with harvest data?
Typically, if you have a good hatch, you're going to see that reflected in harvest 2 years later. As those poults become 2-year-old birds, that's where the majority of the harvest is on 2-year-old birds. And so you'll see a time lag of about 2 years. If you have a really poor reproductive year, a lot of times you'll see that reflected in harvest. Again, it's important to couch all of that looking strictly at harvest, it can sometimes be deceiving, and we would prefer that we look at that in context of harvest, given how much effort was put into achieving that harvest. But nonetheless, sometimes that is how it's reflected. The reproductive success is about 2 years later. Is that kind of what you were asking about?
Well, so are we using harvest data to kind of determine survivability, or are there, like through the turkey project that we're working on, are they doing gathering other data to determine survivability?
Right, yeah. They're looking at all components of the life cycle of a turkey. They're looking at survival of the adults, survival of the juveniles, survival of nests, of poults. They're looking at habitat use. They're looking at disease. They're looking at broadly. I would also add, with this new banding project, that is to try and get at both the harvest rate of gobblers, but we'll also be able to get some estimate of survival of gobblers too. So it's kind of twofold, this banding project. Again, we just started this winter, so we've had one spring where we've had reports of banded birds being harvested, but that was the intent of that project too, is get some of that data.
If we're not doing it in this state, and I don't know that if we are, and I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud, which is really dangerous for me, but if we're not doing it in this state, are there states that adjoin us that are maybe tracking the mortality rates of turkey, not just hunter interaction, but, maybe seasonal? In my opinion, I think we're starting to see more predation. And, is there anybody out there tracking that kind of data that we could?
There's multiple studies going on in adjoining states. Missouri's had several different, they focus on a region of the state, and they've wrapped that one up, and they're focused on another one. South Carolina's had a project going. North Carolina just started one. Alabama's had a long-term project. They're all collecting that kind of information. University of Tennessee also is collecting the annual survival mortality type information. And what I can report from the UT project is that they're seeing survival is fine. It's in par with what they have seen in the literature going back 2 decades. Whereas with productivity, with reproduction, that's what seems to really be declining. So once a poult survives long enough to become a juvenile, they seem to be surviving at normal rates and doing fine. It's just getting enough of those poults to survive.
Thank you, Roger.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Butts?
Yes, Roger, I have 2 questions and connected to observations on your chart. Can we go back to the regional harvest 15 years?
Sure.
Looking at region 2, 3, and 4, they look like they're pretty comparative there. You had relatively even harvest previous years to 20, then we had a very similar spike in 20, and then reduction in 21. But what about region 1, where you had a pretty significant spike in 17 and then a pretty significant decline the next year? And then region 1 didn't see the increase in 20 that the other 3 regions saw. Is there any observation or consideration been given to that scenario?
Sure, and when I was looking at that myself, to me what I was seeing is that there was reports and staff out in those areas were concerned that we saw pretty high, not just declining reproduction, but some pretty high mortality rates in those areas, related probably most likely to the intense flooding that we've seen along those areas. And so anyway, for whatever reason, they felt like numbers had really dropped in Region 1. And what I thought was, well, all the other regions saw a bump in 2020, but we didn't see it in Region 1. And it may be, in fact, that the numbers are extremely low right there. And that's why you didn't see that bump in 2020.
Okay. Now, can we go to the age distribution chart?
This one?
Some interesting observations as you look across from 7 through 21, and the one you sent out on the PDF was 06, so we have that year as well. In 08, we had a significant increase in the harvest of jakes that year. If you look at, 09.
Uh-huh.
And then the next year, it goes back to 10% or just a little over. And then each year following that, then we have a continued increase in the number of jakes harvested. And then in 14, about every 4 or 5 years, you go back up to 10%, and then you start going down again, then you go back up in 18. And then this year, when you reported in 21, then we're back to 10%. It's interesting to me that after we reach that 10% or increase in toms, that we start harvesting more jakes. Is from the field observation, is there any significant discussion about that and why that occurs, or is that just an anomaly?
I don't have any explanation for why it would occur that way, other than just, there's always going to be some variation from year to year. I kind of see your trend that you're referring to, but it just cycles back and forth in my mind. To a large extent, you're balancing, I guess maybe 3 different things. You're looking at how many jakes were produced the year before, how many gobblers are on the landscape, and then you always have to factor in hunter choice and hunter selection. And, the decision that the individual hunter makes whether or not to shoot that bird or not. Okay. So it's
and the last question that I had, I've had several constituents ask about a special season for toms during the Thanksgiving week. And we have a fall season. Can that season be amended to have 3-day hunt in November for the 2 days before Thanksgiving and the day of? Or can there be consideration given to a special one turkey harvest for the 2 days before and the day of Thanksgiving for those that want to take a Thanksgiving turkey? Is there any consideration that could be given there?
We can always give consideration to it, Commissioner. If you're asking me, I think we can consider that. There is a concern that, you know, birds that you harvest in the fall are removed from the spring because nothing's being produced in that, you know, time frame. So you just have to balance, you know, what your interest is. But yeah, I could entertain that if the commission directed us to do so.
Well, the fall season is still in place, is it not?
Yes.
So what sex
be
birds
adding
can
days.
be taken in the fall?
I'm sorry?
I said, can hens, have they been taken out of the mix for fall now?
Yes, sir. By and large, it's got bearded birds only.
So how long is our fall season?
It runs concurrent with the deer archery season, and there's about a 10-day period in there that you can use guns. Otherwise, it's archery only.
Okay. So if we were to look at it and take the October through the other days out and just have a 3-day Thanksgiving season, would that not accomplish maybe reduction in harvest and then addressing some of the constituents concerned that they want to take a bird around Thanksgiving?
Possibly it could, sir. You know, we're willing to entertain all of these ideas, but it would be, in my mind, preferable if we can develop the idea and bring it back to you, and, you know, look at it. I don't know that there's a rush in that one. Any emergency situation that's going on with that?
No emergency, and I appreciate all your work, and I'm like Commissioner Jones. Thank you for all that you do in relation to all the questions that you get and the information that you've given to us. I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Woods, do you have any questions? Mr. Chairman Ripley, do you have any questions?
I just was sitting here trying to remember. So we've got a 3-bird limit in the spring, with the exception of the MAV areas and so forth. Is that 3-bird limit for the annually? In other words, if you take your 3 gobblers in the spring, you can't hunt in the fall?
No, that is a spring limit. So in the fall, the bag limit is set by county, and it's a 1 bird per county limit.
Okay. So a possibility could be to make it I think Virginia does this, where you're allowed 3 birds. If you take 1 in the fall, then you got 2, or take 2 in the spring, then you got 1 to take in the fall.
Yeah.
Alabama's that way as well, in that you have an annual limit, and you can take, sometimes they limit how many you can take in which season, but a total of X number. Or another option is to just have, a set number, a set limit in the fall, rather than by county. A 1 bird fall limit or 2 bird fall limit.
Something to think about. Thank you.
Commissioner Box?
Thank you, Roger. I appreciate all your help on this. I think everybody's answered my question. I'm trying to decide. I just want to reiterate that the UT study is those 4 counties. That the 2-year addition study is just in those counties still continuing?
Yes, it's in the same 5 counties that we've been studying all along. It's 5 counties,
The
3
5
of them
counties,
that are part of the delay, and then 2 that are control counties that did not have a delay in their season.
Okay.
So there's 5 counties.
All right. I've had a lot of comment from hunters in the area. They're concerned about the fanning, especially on public property. They feel like that is aggressively, I think, been a component of high harvest rate. So I didn't know if that was an issue we can consider. So just something else to think about.
Thank you, Commissioner Box. To follow up on Commissioner Box's question, Roger, I asked you just, one-on-one about the 5 versus the 4. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more, because it is a little bit confusing to why we did the 4 and it's really a 5-county study?
Right, I'll try. Hopefully what I sent you was clarifying and not more confusing, because I'm going to repeat what I shared with you. So the UT study comprised 5 counties. And all of a sudden I can't remember them. Murray, Bedford, Giles, Lawrence, and Wayne County. Wayne, Giles, and Lawrence, the 3 along the Alabama border, were selected to be kind of the treatment counties. Those were the ones where we'd been seeing the decline. Murray and Bedford were selected as kind of, if you will, control counties, because we were not seeing any decline. In fact, we were seeing still an increase in harvest trends in those counties. So those were the 5 counties that were part of the UT study. When the change was made to delay the season 2 weeks, we included Lincoln County along with those 3 southern counties, because it was also seeing a decline. We just didn't include it in the study originally because it was too much area to try and cover under that project, but it was also seeing similar decline. So that's why that county was included in the 2-week delay.
Thank you, Roger. Commissioner Childress?
Hello, Roger.
Hi.
Do y'all do any studies in the Mississippi River counties?
We have not recently done any, and I say recently probably within, trying to remember, approaching 20 years, I would guess.
Okay, so that leads to my next question. I seen where you didn't recommend any brood counts or poult counts or whatever, but why not in that county? In the winter, can they not do a count? The wardens, ask the public, because that's when they're bunched up, and the WMAs, to see what's around then. That way we'd have more information down there. Right. So we might need to go to one bird in 2 weeks season.
Well, we do the summer survey in all the counties across the state, so we're conducting that one, and it gets us information on productivity, where we have observations. An additional type survey, it can be done. I feel like part of the the banding work and things that we're doing will help us get to some of that as well. But
that's not in the Mississippi River counties, correct? Or it is?
The banding study is occurring across the state.
So there are some studies being done on the river county, in the river counties.
Yeah, I'm sorry. We are including that, yes, and the surveys are. I thought when you said research, I was thinking a formal research project and transmitted birds and all of that. We haven't done any of that in a while.
But would it be a problem to do like a winter count when they're bunched up and have an idea of what is there?
We could do that, and we may decide we want to do that. Again, when you just get a count, it's gonna be a trend that we're going to look to. So it might take a few years to kind of get some kind of. I mean, you'd have a minimum count from something like that, but I don't know exactly what just 1 or 2 years of data would tell you. Because we haven't been doing anything like that, so it'd be a new data set.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner McLerran?
Just real quick, Roger, thank you very much for your very hard work. One question I had, and it may not fall under your department, but it seems that I've heard mentioned that the nest predators were a lot of the big problems with turkey, maybe with quail, maybe with all your ground nesting birds. Is there something the agency can work toward to try to reduce those populations, or maybe help the hunters help us control some of that in the future?
Mm-hmm. So with nesting, losses from nesting attempts by and large come from predation. I mean, that's what causes nests to fail. So predators are the concern, but habitat, I think, is where it begins. And if you have a limited amount of habitat, you really enable those predators to be able to locate the nest a lot easier because they have less area they've got to search. And so, as we talked last month, you know, if a landowner wants to focus on some predator removal and focus on that, and they can invest the time and energy to do it on a regular basis, they will reduce, for a time at least, they will reduce the predator numbers on their area, at least those that we can trap legally. And they can have an effect on productivity. But along with that, I think habitat would be key. You know, just developing more areas of habitat that are good for turkeys and not as good for predators, or those nest predators anyway. So I think both things, and we as an agency could do more, I think, to promote both actions.
Roger, thank you for all the data and just your presentation. It's super helpful to us to get this kind of information, and it's also with the Q&A data that we were provided. I got a couple questions. One is just, I understand the premise of delaying the season in the Mississippi Alluvial Valley and the 5 counties. With that in mind, and it makes a lot of sense to me for reproductive efficiency, but with that in mind, do we know what the median date of onset of incubation is in Tennessee? And does that vary geographically north to south or east to west?
So based on the study coming out of the UT study in southern Middle Tennessee, the average or the median date of the start of nest laying is about the 15th of April, give or take a few days. It may actually, I think it's somewhere, April 10th to April 15th is the median date of the start of laying the first egg. So if you figure 2 weeks roughly to lay a full clutch, the start of incubation, or the median point of the start of incubation, would be 2 weeks later. How much that varies across the state, we don't really see a lot of variation. You would think that there would be, but when we look at the poult data and we get estimates of how old the poults are based on how big they are, and we backdate that, there's not a real variation from east to west.
So somewhere around the 28th or 9th, do we think, of
Right.
April? Okay. Then and we're talking about the study, just a quick question about that. I know that we said that we extended the UT study just a little bit, 2 years maybe, to
1 year.
take into account 1 year, take into account the change in bag limits and to see if that made a difference, and also to look at those alluvial counties and the 5 counties. But are we doing anything for data normalization for the increased hunter participation spike that we saw during the 2020 season, and potentially ongoing? There may be a lot of people that went 2020 and said, this is really fun, we're going to keep doing it.
Yeah, so the UT study has been conducting an annual survey of hunters as well. And last year they asked a question if hunters had changed their behavior at all, if they'd hunted more days in 2020 or fewer days in 2020, or the same number of days. And they're following that up again this year with similar questions to try and see what kind of behavior hunters had. And based on last year, the results of that, hopefully I'm getting this right, and if I'm if I'm a little bit wrong, Dr. Bueller and the grad students will correct me, I'm sure, but basically some of the hunters increased their participation or their effort, their days of hunting. Some hunters decreased it, and when you put it all together, the total amount of days of hunting didn't really change from 2020 to between 2020 and 2019 and previous years. But they are surveying the same set of about 2,000 hunters from those counties year after year, right, to kind of get a trend of what's going on. And they did see a spike in total harvest. So again, the conclusion that we've drawn from that is that new hunters came in and started hunting. So as we looked at the addition to the project to look at the 2-week delay, that is something that Dr. Bueller is conscious of and trying to figure out how we measure hunter effort and participation between the control counties and the treatment counties, if you will. So we are looking at that, yes, or cognizant of that question.
I think it'd be difficult to normalize it, but we ought to take a shot at it.
Yes. Sorry, that was a long way around of saying we're looking at it. Sorry.
Is that it, Hank? Are you, all right. So, I'll bring this home before we have some public comments. Thank you, Roger, Joe. Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner Box.
I'm so sorry, I'll make it quick. When do you think you'll have the information for this season? I know you said we're still waiting on all the data for this harvest season.
From the hunter survey, so it runs through, June and July, we're collecting data, and so late summer, early fall, we should have the final report. It should be quicker this year than last year. Last year was the first year, so it took more effort kind of getting everything in line, but hopefully this year we'll have it by end of summer.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. I feel like I think the turkeys are unique because we have a lot to look at as far as just, I don't think 2 weeks delay would help it or bag limit. I think there's, like I said, predator, there's a lot involved to study and decide. So anyway, just want to consider that. Okay. I'll look forward to the information.
And I'll share that out, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Roger, Joe, Jason, and the rest of the whole turkey team, we appreciate all the information, and that's obviously been a consistent theme. One thing I will point out that you talk about, but we did a good job of it last year, and I encourage Jennifer and her team to do it again this year, about the delaying your bush hogging to allow for better cover, and we can continue that. We learned last year that private landowners can trap year-round, not hunt year-round, trap year-round. So encourage that, because obviously we know predation is a huge, huge part of the problem that we're seeing with our poult survival, and that goes into the bush hogging. So I think Jennifer and her team can do a great job of that. And I also encourage, as seen before, when we have a lot of questions and they funnel through me, I funnel through Jason, and we get very quick responses back from the agency and Roger. So I encourage everybody to continue that policy. And I guess, Mr. Chairman, will entertain public comments in 3 minutes per person. If you come to the microphone, state your name, and Danette will keep the clock.
That's correct. Do we have someone?
I'm not going to embarrass you, Monty. Thank y'all for allowing me to ask the experts some questions, 3 quick questions, and then I'll sit down and you can answer them. Thank you.
Actually, the way we've been doing this and the way we will do this is direct your questions to us, and then, and then we'll probably turn to them for the answers.
Absolutely.
If we don't have them.
Yes, sir. I was wondering, in the harvest data, how many, what percent do you add in there for unreported harvest? I think it's maybe a bigger number than we realize with the real system. Second question, is there any correlation between, or is there any studies with the chicken manure that the farmers put out now? I know West Tennessee is exploding with chicken and egg production, especially out from Union City here into Henry County, and it seems as a hunter there's a lot less turkeys on farms where you normally see them in the winter when they bunch up, from folks that are using that chicken manure. And last question, we used to have a relocation program, and it's stopped now, and I think it's important to relocate some of those birds from Middle and East Tennessee and vice versa to get new blood or bloodlines into the turkey system. Thank you.
Did you state your name for the record, please, sir?
I'm Bub Edwards from Paris, Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Roger, I'll turn to you to answer those 3 very good questions.
All right. The first question was about unreported harvest, and it was interesting from the hunter survey that we did last year. We did see that the estimated harvest based on that survey was about 30% above what the reported harvest was for the state. And so, yes, it does seem to reflect that there's some level of unreported harvest. However, it doesn't mean that all of a sudden harvest in the state has jumped 30%. That level of unreporting has probably been going on all along. And so again, it's just another index to what's happening. But yeah, so there is some level of unreported harvest. As for the chicken manure, that is being looked at as part of the UT study. That's kind of, I won't say where it began, but that was early on a concern. And so they've been looking at what impact, and just to explain that, the thought is that there's a disease called blackhead that is in the manure, the litter, that is very deadly to wild turkeys. Chickens, not so much. And so the chickens harbor the disease, spread it in the litter, and then it gets spread out on the landscape and can have detrimental impacts on turkeys. So we are looking at that. And to date, we haven't seen a lot of birds, study birds or birds that they have hunter-harvested birds that have positive blackhead in their systems. But we are continuing to look at that because of how quickly and how deadly that disease potentially can be to turkeys. So we're looking at it, but I can't say that we've seen any direct positive link just yet. And then the last question was about relocation. And when we look back over the history of wild turkey management, going back to the middle of the 20th century, the 1950s and before that, numbers were extremely low in the state, and it was largely the restoration through relocation that restored turkeys to the state. And that continued till about 2006. After that, largely any movements that have been done, I think, were more related to nuisance wild turkey situations where we were just trapping them where they were a nuisance and moving them somewhere else. And so there really hasn't been any formal relocation program, primarily because the relocation program is designed to restore turkeys where they do not occur. And largely we have turkeys across the state. We may not have as many as we want, but they're there. The problem is what's causing them not to be at greater levels than they already are. And so putting more turkeys into that area may not answer the ultimate or solve the ultimate question of what's causing them to be depressed. So we're trying to figure out what's causing them to be depressed and solve the problem that way.
Any other comments from the public? Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I can move it to the microphone. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Adam Nelson. I live in Martin, Tennessee, and there's a couple things I'd like to talk about. I probably don't have time to talk about one, and I don't want to suggest for a second that the Commission or the agency hasn't been concerned or focused on some of the problems with turkeys. I know that a lot of money's been spent and manpower put into studying the problems, but to this point there have been no substantive changes made. I know 2 years ago we reduced the limit from 4 turkeys to 3 turkeys. And the discussion was specifically that was agreed to because it was not expected to have any significant impact on the research study because so few people killed 4 turkeys anyways. And that's the only change that we've made in 15 or 20 years, close to, in the turkey regulations. Outside of the study counties, the MAV counties, those types of things, turkeys are disappearing in West Tennessee. And that's not hyperbole. I could spend way more than my 3 minutes telling you about specific farms that I've hunted for years that simply have no turkeys anymore or have a turkey on it. I had some good hunts this year on places that have traditionally had a lot of turkeys, but it was hunting the same 2 turkeys, both of which beat me for the entire season, by the way. But there are just not as many turkeys as there were. And I think a lot of people see that, and a lot of people have recognized that, but that's also anecdotal from somebody you don't know. But one thing I do want to ask is why we're not talking about the actual poult production numbers and the trend that has taken place over the last really 30 years in the state. It's included certainly in the summer survey or the report that was produced this year a few months ago. But it documents the poult production numbers that we've had in the state since the 1980s that have been completed. And you can look at every year, line by line. And I just went through, and by 5-year averages, from 95 to 99, we produced 3.9 poults per hen. The next 5 years, we produced 3.4. The next 2.4. So we dropped by about 28%. From 2010, 2014, we were down to 2.1 poults per hen statewide. In 2015 to 2019, for a 5-year section, it's been below 2 poults per hen, and that's statewide. And I know the general logic is you need 2 just to stay steady. Hen produces 2 poults, one of them's likely to be a hen, so she's produced enough to replace herself. Below that, you're losing turkeys, you're losing your population. And every year for the last 20, we've had fewer poults produced each spring. But we keep talking about the fact that we've had consistent kill numbers in the 30,000s for that same time frame as though that's a good thing. And I'm a huge proponent of steady, consistent kill numbers. But if we know that we're producing fewer turkeys every year, and we do, but we're still killing the same number of turkeys every year, then the
3
only
minutes.
mathematical thing is that we're killing a higher percentage of them. So I would just love to know why we're not doing that. There's more that I'd like to say, certainly, but time's been called on it, so I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any for me. Not that you need them from me. You've got Mr. Shields here, but
Thank you, sir, for your comments. And Roger, would you please respond to those questions or his data points, please?
Sure. And he's accurate in that those poult numbers have been declining, and certainly that's distressing that we see that steady decline. The confounding thing is that over that same 20, 30 years, basically harvest has been somewhat stable. Well, I wouldn't say 30 years because we were still restoring birds, but for the past 15, 20 years as I had on the graph. So how does that continue that long? One data point I wish we'd had all this time was to know how much effort it was taking to get that same number of birds harvested. And I suspect if what we're seeing on the landscape were true, that effort would have been taking more days of effort. But I don't think it's accurate that we haven't been doing anything. If you look back at 2016, the commission reduced the fall. All the changes that we've done have been in the fall prior to last year's, but the commission did make changes trying to address the hen population, protect that hen population, because we know that's the driver of reproduction. And so in 2016, the fall bag limits were dropped to a consistent 1 bird per county. And then in 2018, it was either sex harvest was removed, and it was made bearded gobblers only, or bearded birds only. And so those went into effect in 2016 and 2018. And so we are consistently making changes, trying to understand what's going on and reverse what's happening.
Okay, thank you, Roger. I will add one other change we made last year. We eliminated any bonus birds in the WMAs. I don't know so your bonus bird, meaning you used to shoot a bird in a WMA, it didn't count towards your statewide bag limit. And I don't know, do we have any information on that, Roger, as how many birds that would equate to? It's hard to tell because they wouldn't.
Well, we didn't have that many quota hunts around the state that allowed, that had that bonus bird, and then there were some cooperator properties, I think maybe 5 or 6, that allowed their harvest to be considered bonus birds, and I'm sorry, I don't have a total number with that.
Albeit a small number, we did, in addition to the 4 to 3, we made that change. So at this point, I think, Mr. Chairman, we'll take a 10-minute break, or I'll be demoted to doing something other than the wildlife chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, I guess everyone's back. And so I'll recognize Chairman Granbery again for another segment of the Wildlife Committee.
Okay, thank you, Chairman Ripley. I'd like to call on Wally Akins to give us a little report on the update on quail management in Tennessee, please.
Thank you, Chairman and Commission. My name's Wally Akins. I'm Assistant Chief of the Wildlife and Forestry Division, and I want to give a brief high-level overview of bobwhite quail management in Tennessee. In the presentation, I want to give us a status of quail not only in Tennessee but elsewhere throughout the range. Talk about a project that we are involved in called the National Bobwhite Conservation Initiative. Overview of our ongoing activities in Tennessee on both public and private lands, and how we're managing our properties to create a diverse habitat of grasslands and shrublands and even woodlands in some cases. Also, I want to recognize our partners that we're working with. I feel, and we feel as an agency, it's imperative we keep in touch and involved with our partners to be successful in our restoration efforts for quail in the state. The decline of quail is similar in Tennessee as much of its range. And it's similar also to those species that rely on this grassland, shrubland component. The causes for this decline are many. They're probably interrelated, and they're definitely comprehensive. A lot of things working against these grassland birds. They're also assumed to be primarily associated with the loss of declining quality early successional plant communities. Now, many things play in the role of this decline in plant communities, therefore leading to the decline in quail. A lot of it is intensive farming practices or sterile farming practices, and it's not necessarily related or involves only the ag row crop farms or beef industry, but it's the nature of our society. Nowadays, what we perceive as pretty is something that's mowed off from one fence row to the next, or from one fence row to woodline. So that really not at all is conducive to quail management. Fire suppression is another big cause of this decline. There's increased susceptibility to predation due to habitat changes. Residential development is another cause. Invasive weeds and also disease may be contributing factors in the decline of this species. In Tennessee, we need specific information on how these factors affect quail and their decline in the state. The National Bobwhite Conservation Initiative is a collection of 25 states that have come together to have a unified strategy for bobwhite restoration. Tennessee is one of those states, and we've actually were one of its original members back in 2009. NBCI's Bobwhite Quail Focal Area Program is a science-based initiative designed to demonstrate conclusively that bobwhite populations, as well as populations of other bird species, can be recovered in a 5 to 10 year period when the proper amount and also the proper arrangement of habitat is provided on the landscape scale. Also, these populations are shown to be sustainable. There's currently 26 NBCI focal areas in 20 states. The vision of the use of the focal area concept is to grow to the landscape level and then on further to the regional level over time. In 2013, TWRA designated 4 quail focal areas: Lick Creek, Bridgestone Firestone, Bark Camp Barrens, and Wolf River. These areas are intended to provide high quality, intensively managed bobwhite quail habitat to support a self-sustaining population. Cocker Bottoms Refuge in Blount County has been designated as a quail demonstration area. The reason for this, it maintains the highest known quail populations we have in Tennessee and has for about 20 years. This area is a high quality, intensively managed habitat, which showcases some of the best management practices we have and the real impact they have on producing and sustaining northern bobwhite populations. Wolf River WMA has been designated as our MBCI focal area. Here there's a standard protocol for measuring bobwhite and grassland bird population responses to prescribed management actions. Similar measurements around Wolf River are also made on reference areas that we call them of similar size, and these reference areas are usually on private lands that lacks those prescribed habitat management practices. Work on our WMAs has been done to create and enhance areas for bobwhite quail habitat by eliminating those mat-forming or sod-forming grass species like fescue and Bermuda, and also removing those closed canopy forests, which have very little value for food and cover for quail, and try to convert those areas to quality grasslands. Forest thinnings are also conducted on some areas to create a savanna or woodland condition, which also has a very high-producing herbaceous component at ground level. Afterwards, after we create or enhance these areas, we simply put these areas in some type of rotation where they are disturbed roughly every 2 to 4 years. These disturbances vary in scale, but mostly disking would be one example to produce brood rearing habitat, and also to thin a thick stand of native grasses or produce a bare ground component which is needed for quail. Prescribed fire is used, and prescribed fire is one of our most economical and most beneficial practices that we use, and we try to use fire depending on the objective at different times of the year. Herbicide applications can also be used on too thick or dense rank stands of native grasses, or also targeted herbicide applications for removal of non-native exotic plants. We've also found a value in interpretive signage, and that's really not an on-the-ground practice, but in a way it is. And we use these signs not only to tell the public where our quail focal areas are, but we've went further and explained the benefits of what a grassland or a shrubland looks like and the benefits it has for wildlife. And what it has done for us is minimize those negative public comments that we get from large-scale timber harvests that we sometimes have. On our focal areas, we manage about 4,500 acres per year where some type of action is taken on those acres that I just described above, whether it's herbicide or prescribed fire or disking, etc. On our WMA statewide, just talking about our grassland and forest land, not necessarily our wetland areas, we do manage around 35,000 acres a year. So just on our quail focal areas and the demonstration area, 4 or 5 areas statewide, we actually implement about 10% of our management just on those areas. Last fall, we completed a strategic plan for bobwhite quail. This plan is different from our deer or turkey plans in that this plan is actually a restoration plan. We have habitat goals that identify and prioritize areas for sustainable populations. We want to increase the habitat on these areas and also monitor to document success. Last year, we established an annual small game survey, which we've not had in over 10 years. It's been actually about 15 years since we've had any kind of information. But on estimating hunter harvest and hunter effort for small game, hunter satisfaction, and also the attitudes they have regarding small game hunting. We intend to reach out to our stakeholders more frequently and increase that interaction with them, which we feel is vital to our success. We want to document fundamental annual life cycle characteristics of quail, similar to the turkey study we just heard about. If you recall, this commission approved a 5-year research project which began this last fall and winter, documenting population demographics of quail, including sex and age-specific survival, habitat use, mortality, and reproduction. Needless to say, this is only the tip of the iceberg, and there's really a whole lot more to do. As I mentioned earlier, I feel that success is only possible if we work with our partners and stay engaged with our partners, and even at a higher level. Quail Forever has been a major player both at the state and at the local level. They've really done a lot for us. They've supported part-time staff and part-time or really full-time interns for several years and contributed to many, many habitat projects over the years. This research project that I just mentioned with University of Tennessee would not be possible without the contributions of Quail Forever. Safari Club International supported interns at Wolf River last year. That's kind of been put on hold, but we hope to re-engage in some partnership in some fashion with them in the future. Actually, I think we were not going to submit till next week, but I think we submitted today. I saw an email, but we've actually put a proposal for a grant with NBCI that is for Wolf River. It's $60,000 for 3 years to support an intern or a number of interns, and also to make habitat improvements on that WMA. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about our private lands efforts and our private lands program that we've had since 2006. We've had 4 TWRA private lands biologists that are TWRA employees, but also supported monetarily and also in kind by the Natural Resources Conservation Service. These folks wear a uniform, but they work out of an NRCS office. Since then, we've added 5 additional private lands or Quail Forever Farm Bill biologists that are also a partnership between TWRA, NRCS, and Quail Forever. These biologists work in some capacity with these 3 different agencies, focusing on the federal farm bill or other wildlife conservation programs. These folks meet with landowners, listen to their goals and objectives, and give them management recommendations to achieve those objectives. Also, if they are interested in the cost share programs, they involve those landowners in the steps that it takes to enroll and participate. Last year alone, the private lands program was responsible for approximately 75,000 acres impacted in Tennessee that were beneficial to wildlife. Lastly, I'll talk about our quail monitoring efforts on all of our quail focal areas, and also the reference areas, which are areas of land areas surrounding that WMA. We do an annual breeding bird point count survey. These are spring call counts where we use standard protocols developed by NBCI. We then submit this data to be analyzed and with other states to develop long-term and range-wide population trends. In addition to the spring counts on our NBCI focal area at Wolf River, we do fall covey counts. These are counts conducted in early morning hours where we listen for the hens call for coveys to give us a more accurate number of that fall population of birds. We also, on our NBCI focal area, conduct habitat assessments on Wolf River at 1, 5, and 10-year intervals. That's all I have. I'll be glad to entertain any questions you might have.
Thank you, Wally. That was a very well-done presentation. Does any of the commission have any questions? Commissioner Butts?
Thank you, Wally. I appreciate all that information. Now, in doing my research, I was disappointed in the exposure that we've given to our strategic plan on our website, on our blog site. I would like to see us address that and include maybe the objectives of the strategic plan, particularly the outreach. And I think if we're focusing on our R3, then I'd like to see immediate action and to inform the public and our hunters as to what we have done, why we have done it, and what we expect out of the ongoing application of our strategic plan going forward. And I think that's something that could be accomplished with very little effort, just a little focus.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Cox?
Thank you, Wally. You mentioned Wolf River several times. That has been worked, I guess you said 8 or 9 years. Have you got any results from that effort that you could provide us? Is it working? Are the whistle counts, call counts up? Can you provide any of that?
Yes, sir. Right now, those call counts have been stable, maybe slightly increasing, but that's about all we have right now. Of course, this research project has just started, and we hope to gather a lot of information from that in the next few years, really.
All right, so what just started? I'm confused.
Yes, sir. This last winter was the beginning of a 5-year research project by the University of Tennessee. It is a telemetry research project where interns and technicians and students trap birds attached to radio collar with them, and now they're tracking these birds 5 or 6 times a week. So they'll get a lot of different information.
This is on Wolf River?
No, sir. This is on Wolf River, Bridgestone, Firestone, and Cocker Bottoms WMAs.
All right, so from the beginning of the habitat management at Wolf River several years ago, what's the result? You said it was steady, but does that mean it hadn't increased at all? It's just steady, or has it increased and leveled off, or have the coveys gone from 10 to 20 and leveled off, or what are the results of the effort?
Right, yes, sir. It is steady at this time. Where we have increased is the number of habitat acres at Wolf River. I think they've finished a 300-acre savanna that was completed in 2019, I think. Patrick may be able to correct me, but so there's ongoing creation of habitat simultaneously as we are monitoring this habitat.
Well, if you got counts, I would really appreciate getting a copy of that report to see just a simple report of what the bird counts are for the last 8 years, or however long it's been you've been doing it.
Yes, sir. Be glad
Thank
to.
you. Appreciate it.
Any other questions from the commission? Commissioner Wright?
Wally, thank you. I just had a question, and maybe best take this offline, but is there any, I noticed in the turkey studies that we had some significant incidents of Newcastle and mycoplasma, a couple species of mycoplasma. Is there any evidence that, and there's no evidence in turkey maybe that those cause death or reproductive failure, but is there any evidence in quail? Do we have any data on that? Is there any studies or white papers?
Not in Tennessee, we do not.
It just seems odd that when the turkeys population came in, the quail population went down, and I just wonder if there's some causality of, if Newcastle and mycoplasma might be a factor, but.
Yeah, it could be possibly. Not
It's just
gonna
a
say it
big
was
mystery.
not, but
Yeah.
yes, sir.
Anybody else on the commission have any questions? Commissioner Ripley.
Thank you, Wally, for that report. I appreciate all the hard work you put in on this issue. I noticed that one of the slides ended up saying there's what more, or we need to do more to do. This is something I'm very, very interested in. 35 years ago in East Tennessee, we rarely saw a white-tailed deer, and now they're abundant in East Tennessee. 35 years ago or 40 years ago, we never saw wild turkey in East Tennessee, and now they're abundant there as well. We have elk in this state that we've restored. I'm interested in a plan that I would call the Tennessee Quail Restoration Initiative. which would be a full-on effort to bring whitetail quail, bobwhite quail. Y'all aren't familiar with whitetail quail, are you? Bring bobwhite quail back in sustainable numbers in this state, in as many locations as we can possibly do. There are going to be people that say this is a futile effort, that we can't do this, but I think we can. And what I would challenge the agency to do is to come to us with a specific plan in which you identify the public lands where we could concentrate this effort, identify ways to involve the public, including through our website and so forth and so on, but to find private lands where we could work on this incentive, to challenge y'all to identify who we need to have as partners as part of this effort. We have some partners now. I had a conversation with the chairman of the North Carolina Commission the other day, and they are looking at doing sort of the same thing that I'm talking about here. So I want to challenge the agency to bring the commission a plan to make this a priority, because I believe that we can bring this animal back, and just as we have many others. And so in the next few meetings, I expect we'll talk about this more, but if you'll begin the work on that,
Sure.
I would appreciate that.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Jones?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me? I
Get
couldn't
right on
agree
your
with-
mic.
I couldn't agree with Chairman Ripley anymore in focusing on quail. I know that there's interest throughout the state. If you've ever gone to one of the youth quail hunts that they have now, I mean, there's huge amounts of participation, especially from young hunters and mentors that are wanting to teach them how, what wild birds used to be like when I was growing up. And I've been to some of these focus areas where they've had wild quail populations for over 20 years. So I know it can be done, and I appreciate your commitment to it. I would like to go a step further and ask, could we go ahead and put a schedule? Could say maybe the agency bring us back something and maybe a strategic approach within 90 days or something like that? Go ahead and put a target
Yes, sir.
date on it.
I think that's possible.
That's it.
Any other questions from the commission? Yeah, sure, Chairman.
I guess this is in the form of a comment, but if other commissioners agree with what I've said and what Commissioner Jones has just said, I would love to hear from you, and I would love to hear from you today. Because if we do this, it's something that we need to do collectively and with a common purpose. So anybody that at this point wants to join in this effort, I'd love to hear from you.
Great. Any other Commissioner Butts?
Mr. Chairman, I fully agree with your passion for that. And maybe to address your initiative, could we not maybe consider a task force with some focus on that to include a number of commissioners, representatives from the agency, the key wildlife biologists that are involved in that, maybe the NRC personnel, maybe representative from Farm Bureau representing the farmers or interested individuals, maybe a 12, 15-member task force and put a time limit on that, or key report dates that we could get some immediate action in conjunction, Wally, with our strategic plan, and get all the information that we're talking about out there and really put as much emphasis on this going forward as we have for the last 40 years on deer and turkey. We know that creating habitat for our native species, state wild game bird animal would benefit turkey and deer. So it wouldn't be like they would be in competition, it'd be like we would benefit in all three as to what we've been doing. So I agree, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to see us move pretty quickly on this.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Belew.
Yeah, hey, I'm with you on that there, Chairman. But I would like to say, one question I had was on the small game survey that you all did this year for all the sportsmen. How does that work? Do y'all use the real system on who purchased licenses, or how do you pick out what hunters you send a survey to?
It is sent out to hunters in the real system, but I don't know how they select which hunters get that survey. It's probably a random sample of hunters. They're sent out every year. This will be the second year we've done it.
Yeah, that's it. I'm all for the quail restoration project, Chairman. I think it's a great idea. I think it's going to be tough. I think, but I think it would be a worthy cause, and it would be something that several generations in the future could maybe have never seen. I've shot probably less than 5 live quail in my life, but I've got a shotgun my grandfather used, and I'd love to use it again one day. So thank you.
Okay, and Commissioner Box.
Thank you, Commissioner Granbery. I want to fully support your idea, and I'd love to help with the plan. It's just American heritage. It's just something we all, years and years of it. It's, and I think when I was becoming a commissioner, I had more people call me and say, if you're getting on the commission, can you help the Bobwhite quail?
Yeah.
Oh, well, we'll see. So anyway, I think it's a lot of support from the public as well. So thank you.
Mr. Childress.
I'm with you.
Man, a few words.
Wally, you a farmer?
But thank you, Wally.
I've got a question, Mr. Chairman.
Who's that?
I do.
Down here.
I'll take Wally's time. While I fully support bringing back the Bobwhite quail, the reality is it's been studied and attempted for 20 years, and I guess the question is what's holding, if the agency knows the answer to that, knows the cure for it, then I'd like to know what that is, because nobody has been able to answer that question. It'd be wonderful if Tennessee could do that, but you come back with a strategic plan to do that. I wonder what that's going to look like, because I thought that that's what we had done when we established these focus areas, and the agency told us years ago that we would never get quail back on the landscape because the habitat was just too big to manipulate to 50-year ago habitat. So I wonder what that's going to look like. I mean, what new idea are you going to put on paper and give to us to make this happen that you haven't already tried? Not to say it's impossible, I guess, but I'm proud of the chairman for doing it, but really, what else can be done that you're not doing that money could help you do?
Well, the quail plan, the strategic plan that we have now is a 5-year plan. There's habitat goals, population goals, research goals, and outreach goals in this plan. It's really not anything different than what we've tried before. I think there's just more of it, a more focused effort. And it being a 5-year plan, we recognize that our accomplishments that we want to do in this plan are what we can do in 5 years. We don't, Bobwhite quail is basically a byproduct of society 50 years ago, or maybe longer than that, when we had smaller fields, unkept fence rows, did not have those intensive farming practices, and so quail was able to survive as that byproduct of the landscape. Now when it gets in the public psyche, so to speak, when we tell them or show them what quail habitat looks like, or even more so when they walk out in it, it's a shock to them because it's a grown-up field. So in the 5-year plan that we have, more focused effort will be on what we think is achievable, and that will be mostly on our WMAs and possibly some private land surrounding those WMAs. So it's really not any different, but I think maybe the focus would be more attention paid on our WMAs than before.
Well, part of my question, the skepticism, is that Ames Plantation has 18,000 acres, and their focus is quail management. The national field trials are there, and they've been unable to establish wild quail as they once were. So I don't want to, I'm not trying to throw cold water on anything, but I don't want unreasonable expectations. I just wonder what we're going to do differently. So I guess keep doing what we're doing and just do it bigger.
One thing about Ames Plantation, it's really managed for field trials, not for quail habitat, and there's a little bit of a difference. They're putting out pen-raised birds, which we're really, we're kind of against that, especially in areas that we're wanting to restore habitat and have mainly a wild bird population. So there is a difference between Ames Plantation and, say, Wolf River or Bridgestone Firestone, just in management style.
Okay, well, I think they put out pen-raised quail because they can't raise wild quail, but your point's taken. Thank you.
Any other questions? So we'll take questions if there are any questions from the public.
Mike Butler with the Wildlife Federation. Just want to say that we would strongly support the chairman's recommendation. We've been working with the agency staff on the quail plan. We reviewed it, had lots of different conversations with them. I will say this, some of the efforts are going to fail. That's how you learn, that's how you get better. But even if they fail, you're going to have better habitat for a lot of different things. Songbirds, rabbits, all kinds of different critters that'll benefit from it. And I'm not aware that I'm not aware of an agency, and Wally, correct me if I'm wrong, has there ever been an effort along what the agency did around turkey restoration and deer restoration around quail restoration? I'm not aware of that, but if the resources, if this commission is willing to put the focus and resources, and I think Commissioner Butt, that was a very great, I love the comment. Maybe it's going to take more than just this agency to do it. Maybe there needs to be outside work. I mean, the agency's work's great already with the NRCS, but is there a missing ingredient that could be added by collaboration? So you have our full support. We're going to support you, Wally, however we can help. And I know that there are a lot of people around the state that are interested in the question. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Wally. We appreciate it. Now, Wildlife Committee will end its report. I'll remind everybody in the public that Proclamation 2103 and 04 will be heard tomorrow at the full commission meeting at 9 a.m. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. All right, Commissioner Kent Woods is building some kind of grandiose thing in his home and couldn't join us here today. In his absence, his vice chairman, Tommy Woods, will handle the Fisheries Committee.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd like to call Chief of Fisheries Frank Fist to the podium. He's already there. Look at that.
I'm here. Thank you, Chairman. And thanks to everyone for giving me an opportunity to talk about our sport fish monitoring efforts. And most importantly, I want to get to why we do what we do. We put a lot of effort into this, and I'll start at the beginning. Can I get those middle lights there, Thomas or Kate? When we talk about fisheries, that's kind of a foreign word to people. You know, we don't have hunteries or other things, but we have fisheries, and what they are the habitat, the fish, and the people involved. When you have the the overlap of those three things, we have what we call fisheries. And in Tennessee, we have some of the most diverse habitats that our biologists work. We're working large impoundments, the TVA core impoundments. We got Reelfoot Lake. We got our agency fishing lakes. We help out with state parks and municipal lakes. And then there's thousands of miles of small headwater streams, medium-sized smallmouth streams, and big rivers. We cover all that habitat looking at the fisheries in those areas. And we have one of the most diverse, if not the most diverse, freshwater fishing opportunities in the 50 states, I believe. We've got 5 species of bass, we've got two of crappie, catfish, we've got 4 species of trout. We're probably the furthest south you can go and catch lake trout east of the Mississippi anyway. And of course, all those other species I have listed there. And in addition to trying to understand what's going on with those species, we also have a keen eye towards the other 325 species of native fish that our biologists can recognize and keep up with as part of our mandate as a management agency. But most importantly, we have about 1 million anglers, and they're as diverse as all the fish and habitats that we have, trying to meet their goals. And when they all do things differently, some are catch and release, some are fly fishing, spin fishing, bait fishing, you name it, we got it. So why do we monitor? We want to know the status and population dynamics of our important species. We want to know if our regulations are working. We want to evaluate our stocking programs. And we're identifying opportunities for anglers. Sometimes we'll have an opportunity to buy land, or an opportunity comes up at a bridge access and people want to know, should we invest in a ramp here? Well, we know what the fishery is like based on some of the work that we do, and sometimes we'll prioritize based on that. And we'll also tell fishermen if there is some sleeper fishery out there that they need to know about. Of course, we're inventorying species. We want to know if our native species are there or not. And we're watching for unwanted species, just like we are with Asian carp and whatever the next species will be that could come. So our main fisheries monitoring methods are looking at the fish and the anglers. The main sampling techniques are electrofishing, gill netting, and trap netting. We do these about annually on all the lakes and streams that are of highest importance, meaning there's a lot of fishing going on those waters. And we also interview our anglers on the priority waters, and it's not all reservoir work. There is stream angler surveys as well. So I'm going to jump into electrofishing. If you're not familiar with it, we have a generator or battery on the boat or on our backpack that's delivering electrical current to the water. It's not lethal. The fish are stunned, and they are picked up by the net. When they go in the live well, they recover. And this picture here, you can't see it as well, but you'll see some white dots there. There's 2 electrofishing boats out on the water that day, and that was the trail of fish behind my boat while we were looking for a different species, and those fish will recover and go back down. Those are white bass below Pickwick. So we've adapted electrofishing as a science across the nation and the world to cover a wide varieties of species and in a lot of different habitats. Of course, we can't take our standard electrofishing boat everywhere. We've got a lot of adaptations you'll see in a minute here. But this is an image from the bow of the boat if you haven't been out. When you get into fish, they start coming towards the probe. We typically use DC current, and that has a neat feature in that the fish are drawn to that anode that is out in front of the boat. So they're not coming up all around the boat. They're actually just coming up where those probes are coming in the greatest abundance. And they'll be picked up. We'll have standard protocols about how long a distance we're going to sample. Often we usually do fixed sites over time so we don't have differences in habitat messing us up from year to year. So here's an extreme opposite example of our boat electrofishing. Here's our backpack crew working probably somewhere in Cherokee National Forest. This is probably a wild trout, certainly is a wild trout survey. In this case, they're trying to estimate the number of trout in a reach of river by running through and catching everything they can 3 times in a row and doing a little math at the end of it. They can tell you how many trout are in that section of water that they worked. The field on those probes is very tight, not very wide, so we have to have several of backpacks across the creek to cover the water. Because the water in the park or in the mountains is so dilute, the current doesn't travel as far, so that's why our fields are so tight. Here's a Middle Tennessee stream. I think this is Big Swan. We were doing a special project here. We wanted to get as many fish as we could, but those tow barges carry the generator, and then we have cord reels that run the power out to the anodes, which are in our hands, and then the boat serves as the cathode. And that's a very powerful, we can put a lot of power in the water with that system. And I can tell you personally, if you're wearing waders that breathe and you sweat in those waders, you feel it as well. It hurts. So you got to watch that. But that's one of our other adaptations. When we work fast water or tailwaters, or maybe even the Duck River, Buffalo River, we have jet boats that are rigged up for electrofishing. That's always a wild ride. It's even more fun when you go out at night. We used to do our sampling on the Caney Fork with 2 generators working in February, and we've since rethought that. It was just too stressful, but a lot of times we will work at night because our catchability is better on really clear rivers. And with all this sampling, we're not trying to catch every fish. We just need to catch a good subsample, a nice random subsample. Here's the boat that we built for the Hiwassee River. It's actually manned by a man. That's actually Major Janes there in his early days paddling this, or he's the oarsman on that rubber raft, which is an electrofishing unit. And that worked well enough and served a purpose at that time, but we've since gotten automated here, and we have these rubber catamarans, they call them, that were used to shock rivers like that. Say like the Powell, Knoll, Chuckey, and places where they have a lot of rocky habitat and shallow habitat. But this is certainly our mainstay, typical shocking boat, and you'll see this on our reservoirs and our agency lakes. So shift gears to gill netting. Back up with the electrofishing. We do that typically when the water temps are like spring temperatures are best, fall temperatures are best. The heat of the summer we don't do as well in the boats, and the winter we don't do as well. We gill net, we tend to do that in the mid-fall to throughout the winter. And gill nets, if you don't know, are just clear monofilament mesh of various sizes, and that entangles the fish. We might set that for a few hours, in this case where we're looking for sauger, or we might set it overnight on a reservoir to just look at what the whole community of fish looks like. And we don't use gill nets a lot. We might only do 12 samples on a reservoir, for example, or whatever it takes to get the brood fish we need in another instance. But they are an interesting way to get the fish that electrofishing will not get, and the only way to get them fish. The trap nets are, this picture here shows it pretty well. There's a lead or a fence, if you will, that we put on shore, and then we bring that lead out and drop that trap off the front of the boat. And fish swim along the shoreline, hit that lead, and they don't know which way to go. So they can't swim on shore, so they swim out and they get caught in the trap. We use these traps exclusively for crappie management. They're a really good tool to count or get an index of how many young crappie are in the population, and it gives us some forecasting ability about what's coming in the years to come. And of course, in all these sampling methods, we're collecting fish, we're handling them, and this is I think this is the most interesting part of it all, is where we're counting the fish, we're identifying them by species, we're getting lengths and weight on each fish, and most of them just go back after they're weighed and measured. But some fish will take a subsample of each size group of fish that we catch to try to be able to describe the age structure of that population. So some fish are sacrificed for age determination. By and large, most fish go back. Once we get those fish, we remove their inner ear bones. The top 2 images there is an X-ray. I think that's a trout. These aren't my pictures, but you can see those really white structures with the black arrow sticking to them. Those are the inner ear bones that all fish have, and there's actually 3 sets on each side. That bigger one is the one that we pulled to do our, what we call aging fish. But what we're doing is counting the annuli on each of those scales to see how old it is. And on this lower picture shows a crappie. It's an old crappie, it's 6 years old. You can see how we count the rings. I have little dots on there to show where the annuli are. That's a 6+ fish. It's in its sixth growing, it's completed its sixth growing season and growing a little bit more. So by having, we've got these fish, we know how old they are, we know how much what their length was and what they weighed. Because of that, we have an estimate of growth. It took this many years for a fish to get this big. So we'll have a whole population or subsample of fish, and we'll be able to talk about the average length of a fish of a given age in the whole population. And by doing that, we can apply that to the number and sizes of fish that we caught and do some other math that I won't get into, but we can actually estimate the mortality rate of the population. You see more young fish than you see old fish because fish die. Every day there's fish dying somewhere. But over time, you have fewer old fish. And it's that slope or that rate of death is what we're measuring for mortality rate, which becomes important in management of species like crappie, where you have high mortality rates. And if you're trying to grow them to be an inch bigger, let's say, in a length limit, you've got to remember that fish are dying at a really high rate, so you lose fish. That's why we care a lot about mortality rates, and it drives our modeling of fish regulations. So just to recap what we get out of the fish survey results, so we get a relative abundance of a species. We'll know how many were there this year compared to last year. In a lot of cases, we've got 20 years of data on some of these bigger reservoirs. We have a size distribution. We know how many fish over 16 inches are in the lake versus how many of that size were in there last year. But we have an age distribution. That helps us know, obviously, how old the oldest fish are. It gives us an idea of the mortality in that population. Fish populations where you have lower mortality rates, you get older fish. That stands to reason. And that distribution will also indicate sometimes that we might be missing a whole year class of fish. Like if crappie spawn, they spawn every year, but they're not always successful. If we're missing age 3 crappie, that means crappie didn't have a successful spawn 3 years ago. Of course, I already mentioned growth rates and mortality rates, and that reproductive success is what we're looking for as well. If we miss a whole age group, we know something happened. So all this information is used to really define the biological potential of these populations. If someone says, oh, we should put a 20-inch size limit on crappie, we know that's not going to work because we've got tens of thousands of fish that we've observed over 20 years, and they're just not going to get that big. And we know why. We can track the growth rates and explain that. We evaluate our regulations by doing this. If we intended to, if we put a slot limit on somewhere where we're protecting fish from 12 to 18 inches, let's say, we would like to see more fish in that 12 to 18 inch slot accrue, because that's the reason why we put it on there in a lot of cases. And we're evaluating stocking programs. If we're stocking fish, we would like to see them again when we do our repeat samples, to know that they did survive and they are able to make it in that system. So that's what we do with the fish. We also interview the anglers in a very objective way. We typically will look at about 20 fisheries a year, and we have dedicated staff that only interview anglers. They're provided a random design that tells them what days to work. They flip a coin if it's going to be morning or afternoon. They're statistically assigned a part of the lake to work on, and at the end of the year, all of their math is back calculated so that we know how to represent that whole reservoir. And so that's the work that they're doing. When they first show up for work, they count all the anglers they possibly can in their unit of effort for that day, and then they see how many people they can interview to get some more specific information about the trips. Some of the data we get from the angler surveys, we get an estimate of the total number of trips on a reservoir, for example. And we'll also know how many of those fishermen said, I'm fishing for bass only, or I'm fishing for walleye, so we can get an idea of what species are most important on those lakes. And we also will look at catch and harvest rates as well, and we want to know how bass fishermen are doing, what their catch rates are for bass. We don't care about how many bass a crappie fisherman is catching, for example. But we were able to calculate those rates with some precision. We monitor our precision as well, so we're careful to not use data that if we don't get enough samples, sometimes the data will have a lot of too much variance for comparison. We're wary of that. We do estimate economic value. We ask people how much they paid for their trip, and we ask them how much they'd be willing to pay for the same trip. How much more would they be willing to pay? And lastly, we ask some demographics. Where are you from, or what zip code are you from? Are you fishing in a bass tournament? And we can ask other questions if we decided that's what we need for that water body. So from this, we can characterize the angler experience within the fishery. It's yet another way of evaluating our regulations and our stocking programs. When we stocked black-nosed black crappie, we wanted to see fishermen catching black-nosed black crappie, and we did, or we didn't. We pulled some stocking programs down because we weren't seeing fishermen catch those fish. So it is a good tool, and it's independent. It's another way to look at the water, and we're glad to have that program. So just in summary, the monitoring of these fish and anglers provides the foundation for all the fisheries management we do. I know there's a lot of other factors that come into this at the end of the day. There's public requests. The commission will have needs that they'll want to see addressed. But at the end of the day, the fish are only going to grow at a certain rate, and that's what we're out there trying to monitor. So we need to know what our biological boundaries are. And with that, I will take any questions if you please.
Frank, I'd just like to point out that I've been on the commission for 2.5 years now, and I'm pretty certain I'm the only commissioner that's not had the ability to shock fish. So keep that in mind.
Okay, I got that request twice today now. Just so you know, the typical bass reservoir shocking should be done by now. There are some people that will be out collecting brood fish for striped bass and hybrid striped bass in the weeks to come. And after that, it gets more exciting. You can get on the rivers. That's where you really see some adventure.
Sounds like fun. All right, Frank, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Chairman Ripley, back to you.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Woods. Next will be Budget Committee, headed up by my good friend Bill Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll start with Mr. Tarkenton. And if your laptop did, your iPad did like mine, you'll need to scroll over at the top to March 2021 to get the report. Okay, Mr. Tarkenton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There should be a 2-page report on your laptop. At the top of the first page, the boating fund is detailed through the month of March of 2021. The registration income is up approximately $867,000 over projection, and the expense to date is 39% of the annual allotment. In the middle of the page, the wildlife fund, the income is up almost $3.1 million over the projected amount for 2021 through March, and the expense to date is 57% of the allotment. At the bottom of the page, or the third slide, the wetlands acquisition fund has $16,884,000 as a balance. And the last page or last slide details the value of our investment and the remaining balance that's in each of the reserves of those four funds, and how much are invested, or how much we would be receiving off the Treasury's SPIF. That's the State Pooled Investment Fund.
Any questions from
Any
the
questions?
committee or the commission? Thank you, Ken. One clarification that he mentioned, if you didn't pick up on it, the negative 2.17%, and then last month the 1.83 is not the return on the investment, it's the value of the bonds. And if you know anything about bonds, which I don't know a lot, the value fluctuates, but the income that the bond produces remains the same percentage, and it's not a negative. This is just a value based on interest rates. As they increase and fluctuate, the value of the bond, face value of the bond, might go to up or down. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I believe next is Mr. Richardson.
Thank you, Chairman Cox, members of the commission. You should have in front of you a one-page list of items. I'm here to request some budget expansions, and the first one I want to go over is got some more detail in front of you there on the desk. These items are, for the most part, pieces of equipment. There's also 4 professional services items that you'll note there at the top. The equipment items on this expansion request were all equipment that were previously approved, but for the 11 bulldozers that you note there. These were items that during the pandemic, when the state went on a equipment buying freeze, the director's office made the decision to remove those items from our budget so as to not appear overinflated. This would be our request to put those things back in. I do want to highlight the 11 bulldozers that are on the list. This is a unique opportunity for us. These are some bulldozers that are currently owned by the state of Tennessee and under the Division of Forestry in Department of Agriculture, and they are being surplused. And we have the opportunity to buy them for $15,000 a piece, which is going to provide us significant capabilities on our WMAs, both for controlled burning, also fire suppression, things of that nature. That is a new request that's not been previously approved. The other items of equipment there all had been previously approved. Also, we'll draw your attention to the top, the Lower Mississippi River feasibility study. That is a unique opportunity that generates about, I think there's about $8 million allocated of federal money to go into studying the Lower Mississippi. They didn't have to pick that section of the river, but the section of the banks of Tennessee and Arkansas, they have to generate a certain amount of match. We are matching the contribution of the state of Arkansas, and the reason we're bringing that request for you today is to make sure that we have that money available on July 1 so that those contracts can get started. You also note the big ticket item there, the Asian Carp Harvest Incentive Program. We're requesting we intentionally took the money from the 22 budget out so that we would have a better, more clear understanding of how much money was going to be needed to keep up with the fishing pressure. I can tell you that in March of 2021, the commercial fishermen are catching Asian carp at a rate 3 times better than they were in March of 2020. So they are really getting after this fish. I think, I'm looking to Frank, I think they caught over 600,000 pounds in the month of March alone. 900,000 pounds, excuse me. So that $1.5 million we feel is a comfortable amount that will allow us to be assured as we work through the contracts with those wholesale fish buyers that we will not run short, and we will be able to continue to incentivize the removal of those carps from the water. The Misty Cove Access Maintenance Contract is something that's expiring. That's an access point on Old Hickory Lake, and that is a 5-year contract, $10,000 a year for the maintenance, trash pickup. And then the elk habitat aerial spraying contract, that is a previously approved item, but it is professional services. That is some aerial spraying of herbicide that will allow for some wildlife openings on North Cumberland. With that explanation of those budget expansions, I am requesting the Commission expand fiscal year 22 budget in the amount of $3,452,725. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Chris. As a clarification that I got, the Asian Carp Incentive is the contract authority that when the contract authority, last year was about $600,000, I think, and the fishermen, went over that amount, or we didn't have the authority to give them any more money, and we had a problem with the delay downtown getting it approved. So with the rate of fishing, the guys think that the 1.5 authority gives them a little breathing room, so that doesn't happen again. Are there any questions by the committee or the commission? Yes, sir.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I have a question about the dozers. Do we know the maintenance schedules on these from the state? Are they all 3s, 4s, 6s, or different dozers? Or?
They're all the smaller, they're all 3s and 4s.
All 3s and 4s.
And they have a number of them. I think there's 50 or so that are going to be surplus, so we're going to be able to have the cream of the crop pick first, is one of the reasons why we wanted to go ahead and get this money available July 1.
Okay, so we have some idea of the maintenance on the tracks and...
Yes, sir. Our friends at the Department of Agriculture are going to keep us informed on exactly which ones are the good ones, which ones are not.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? I'll entertain a motion from the committee.
So moved.
I'll second it.
Motion second. Any further discussion? Any discussion from the audience? All in favor say aye.
This is a committee vote only.
Committee vote only, correct. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The second budget expansion that we're requesting today in the amount of $567,000 to the Greene County Shooting Complex. This is going to allow for an expansion. They're building a full sporting clays course, also expanding their pistol opportunities and creating, I believe, a 300-yard rifle range. This would be 100% federal eligible money, and requesting the commission approve that budget expansion to go to Greene County and help improve their range.
Any questions? Greene County's done a great job with their range up there, and they continue to do so. So I fully support this. I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Any further discussion of the audience? All in favor of the committee say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The third and final budget request today is an additional $25,000 federal eligible money to go towards the construction of the new elk tower at North Cumberland Wildlife Management Area. This increase is just due to the cost of material increase that everybody's familiar with that's going on right now across the nation. This will allow us the appropriate funds to complete that project.
Any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Chris, do we have a schedule? I know we obviously got a budget based on the material increases. Do we know a schedule of completion?
I don't. I'm looking back to the back of the room to Mike Butler. I know Terry Lewis is tenacious when it comes to getting, once the things get going. Terry's pretty good about pulling projects together and getting things built. But I defer to Mike. I haven't talked to Terry recently to know kind of what that anticipated completion date is.
Mike Butler, Wildlife Federation. My understanding in speaking with Terry last week is that they have the contract from the agency. They have a couple of questions about that they're trying to work through with that, since it's the chamber that's the actual grantee, the Chamber of Commerce there in Campbell County. But we expect them to work all that out and hopefully get this done prior to elk viewing season, which would be August, September. That would be the plan of this year. Now, I will check that and double check. If something changes, I'll let everybody know, but that's the plan. And to Chris's point, their steel cost went up significantly this past year. So,
Welcome to my world.
I hear you. I hear you. So we're excited about it. I know Terry's ready to get going, and once everything gets lined up, just get out of his way, because he doesn't waste daylight.
Okay, thanks, Mike, and I appreciate you keeping us up to date.
Anyone else? Commissioner Butt.
We're going back with steel this time. What's the life expectancy of the tower versus the previous wood construction?
I think it'll probably outlast all of us here. It's going to be made out of steel and concrete and composite material. So.
Any other questions?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Got a motion, a second. Any further discussion, comments from the audience? All in favor say aye. Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission.
Thank you, Chris. Mr. Chairman, that's all we have. We'll bring this to you, to the full commission tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This time I'm going to call on Steve Jones, Chairman of Retention and Recruitment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Wisniewski, and please tell me I said that right. Spell it. And while she's coming to the mic, I want to say that there's some changes going on internally at the agency, and we hope to bring you a broader report here in the next month or two about what we've got going on. But Jennifer had some things she wanted to share with us this afternoon.
And I promise that I will be the fastest presentation in the West today, so we can get out of here in a reasonable time. But I did want to talk about just a couple of things. If you haven't gotten out your phone and looked at your TWRA on the Go app recently, this week, please look at it, because it's had a facelift. It's gotten much easier to read, and it's got a lot better design and flow, and now we have the ability to do push notifications, which I know all of you have smartphones, and all of you probably have gotten push notifications and maybe taken an action because of one of those. So we'll be sending some of those out for season openers, other timely things, maybe even the conservation raffle. So that's really cool stuff going on with the app, and I've got a wish list a mile long, so if there's any improvements that you guys would like to see on the app, please let me know so that I can get those on the list and get our developers working on those things. There are some harvest reporting improvements that I know nobody, let's hope we're not reporting any harvests right now, so that will roll out for fall. And I thought you might want to know a couple of app stats. So currently we have 167,000 active users of our app, and the percentage of harvests that is reported through the app is over 80%. So over 80% of everything that is harvested and reported is done through the app. That is a huge increase, because just a year ago, before we implemented Tag Before You Drag, it was about 50%. So really cool that so many of our hunters are using the app. And in the last 12 months, over 500,000 transactions performed right there on your phone. So cool stats. Any questions on the app before we move to the conservation raffle? All right. Well, our friends at the foundation have done a phenomenal job getting a package together for this year's conservation raffle. There's 10 prize packs, and the premier one is $50,000 towards the truck of your choice, towards the Ford truck of your choice. So you get to go to any Mid-South Ford dealer at the end of this, and if you win this raffle item, you get to go shopping at that Ford dealer and buy whatever truck you'd like. We get $50,000 towards it. If you pick one that's more than that, then you got to pay the difference. But it's a really cool prize, and I think that this will open up our raffle to a whole new group of people to be able to talk to. We got a boat and a trailer. So there's a fishing package that's a boat and a trailer. So that's another really cool prize that we're glad to have this year. And then we have the UTV package again, so the side-by-side, so we can make sure that everybody gets off-road. Another really cool sponsorship and partner we got this year is Academy. So Academy has given us a huge donation of things for Free Fishing Day this year, as well as giving us a gift card for the Outdoor Adventure package. And then we have the hunt packages still. So there's the President's Island package, there's the turkey hunting package, there is the waterfowl hunting package, and of course the big elk tag is still up for grabs in the conservation raffle. Then we will have a couple of gun packages. There's a Henry rifle package and a long-range shooting package. And then we're also going to be able to give 100 really nice little pocket knives. I don't want to call them condolence prizes, but it's, if it's the next 100 people that didn't get drawn for the top 10 will get a knife. And a big thank you to the sponsors. Again, the foundation has just done a phenomenal job getting all of these packages together and getting all of this stuff donated. And we will be kicking off the raffle next week. And everybody is invited to buy tickets. Yeah, not you guys. Not you. And I wanted to talk to you about one other effort that we've got going for R3 right now in the spring for fishing. Has everybody ever watched Hulu or a streaming app or something like that? So when you deliver commercials on that, it's called OTT, or over the top. And the OTT ads are trackable by using tracking pixels. So if you're logged into your Hulu account, then technology can follow you around to other websites and know what your behavior is. So we are serving up ads to outdoorsy type people to encourage them to go fishing. And I thought you might want to see some of these ads.
So when I went to college, I was stressed out. I stopped fishing altogether. Eventually I realized that something was missing. Saw some people at the river fly fishing. It just looked really interesting. There's just something about the water, the stressors in my life and pressure, it just felt like it went away. So if you're considering fishing, grab a rod, find that body of water, and you might find that missing piece.
So that one's going to be in Knoxville, mainly.
Fishing has been kind of a cool way for me to get to know a lot of parts of Tennessee. I moved to Nashville about 2 years ago, and in the second year, I started driving around to different lakes and rivers, and I think fishing made me slow down and just kind of appreciate where I was and kind of be in the moment a little more. If we catch a fish or we don't catch a fish, we're still outside and we're still having a good time. And fishing has showed me how incredibly beautiful Tennessee is.
And one more.
It doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, what your history is, what your background, man. You can literally be walking the bank and you see some dude and you're just like, hey, any luck? And that spawns a conversation every time. You'll find out about their family, you'll find out about what they do for a living. Serious conversations, some funny conversations. To this day, I have a handful of guys that it all started out with, hey, any luck?
So those will be focused on certain population centers throughout the state as far as their theme goes. And we will be able to then see how many license sales we get off of people that have viewed those commercials. So if there's any questions?
Any questions for Jennifer?
I don't have a question, but I know you know Richard really well at the foundation, and Richard, big part of the raffle and his graphics, and he's a very talented guy. He had a very bad case of COVID, but everybody's very happy to see that Richard's back home and recovering well. He's got a ways to go, but just want to publicly give a shout out to Richard and everything he does. He's back in the office half the time just to get the raffle out. So a big shout out to Richard. I know you know Richard well, and he's a great friend of this agency.
Indeed.
I've got just to comment on where this program started 16 years ago. Jennifer's, and it's progressed, but Jennifer, you and everybody in the program are doing a great job. This is so exciting to see what you're doing and how you're marketing the agency and doing those things. It's just really good. My compliments to you.
Thank you, sir.
Everybody else.
Any other comments, questions for Jennifer? Jennifer, thank you. Get to end the meeting on a high note. Appreciate it. She does do a great job. Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Commissioner Jones. Just have a quick announcement. The Commissioner's Dinner tonight will be at the Dinosaur Room on the lower level. Wonder if that's some sort of snide comment about our age. But anyway, the social will begin at 6. The dinner will begin at 6:30. Mr. Director, do you have anything you need to say at this point? Then I say adjourned.